Hello, friends. It's us again, the Paranormal M team. We truly love what we do, and we're incredibly grateful for all your love and support, and for sharing so many of your supernatural experiences with us. Thank you so much. We hope our stories and paranormal experiences help you fall asleep more easily and enjoy a great night's rest. It means a lot to us to know we're keeping you company. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's get started. So this happened years ago, early 90s. My spouse, Mara, and I rented this sweet little house in Brookside, Kansas City. We didn't deal with the owner directly. Everything went through this attorney, Mr. Halverson, because the owner was an older woman who'd moved back to her hometown in eastern Nebraska after her husband died. Anyway, one night I'm home alone, doing something completely normal, folding towels, being an adult, pretending I have my life together. I'm upstairs in this narrow hallway, standing at a linen closet that's directly across from the bathroom. The kind of hallway where the lights always feel a little too dim, even when they're on. I'm reaching into the closet, stacking towels, and out of nowhere I get that feeling. You know the one. That cold little crawl up your back that says, someone's behind you. I freeze with my arms full of towels, and I can almost feel the eyes on me. I slowly turn around, and I swear, for a split second I see an elderly man standing there. Not solid like a normal person, more like a presence shaped like a person. Pale, still, watching me like I'd interrupted him. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might actually pass out. And then, nothing. The hallway's empty. Just me and my ridiculous towels and my heart trying to escape through my throat. I didn't tell Mara. I know. But I didn't want her laughing at me. And honestly, I didn't want to plant that image in her head and scare her. So I kept it to myself and tried to act normal, like I hadn't just met the world's creepiest invisible neighbor. A couple months go by. It's a Sunday afternoon. I'm downstairs watching football, half asleep on the couch, and Mara's upstairs putting towels away in that same linen closet. And then I hear her scream. Not like a little surprised yelp, a real, full-body scream. She comes running down the stairs so fast she nearly misses the last step. She's shaking. Her face is white. I sit up like, what happened? What's wrong? And she tells me. She was putting towels away, got this horrible feeling that she was being watched, turned around, and thought she saw an old man standing in the hallway. And when she said it, I felt my blood go cold, because it was exactly what happened to me. So I'm holding her there in the living room, trying to calm her down, and I finally tell her my story. How I'd felt it too, how I'd seen him too, and how I'd kept it quiet because I didn't want her to laugh or get freaked out. Mara just stared at me like, "You've been sitting on that?" After that, it was like the house had a personality. Nothing flying off shelves, no dramatic movie stuff, just this steady, uncomfortable feeling sometimes. Like the place didn't quite want you there. A little later, I dropped off the rent check at Mr. Halverson's office, and I asked him, casually, like I wasn't about to sound insane, if he knew how the owner's husband had passed. He kind of paused, then said the husband had had a massive heart attack, right there in the home. Paramedics came, but he was already gone. Then he asks me why I wanted to know, and I couldn't bring myself to tell the whole story. I said something vague, like I'd had this odd sense that the man had died there. And I left it at that, because what else do you say without sounding like you've been licking batteries? But then things got worse in a way that had nothing to do with ghosts. And they're gone. We just stood there, stunned, watching taillights disappear. The insurance claim ended up around $18,000, which was a lot of money back then. And here's the part that still makes me mad. After the settlement, the insurance company canceled our policy. Our agent, Darlene, told us the only thing she was allowed to say was, "You need to move." She wouldn't explain, just kept repeating it like she was reading off a script. 4 months later, this is the kicker. We go to bed early one night. All the lights are off, the house is quiet, and we're dead asleep. And we wake up to someone trying to break in through the same entry point as before. You could hear it, this awful, deliberate sound, like somebody testing the world. Mara and I bolt upright, flipping on lights, making noise, and whatever it was, it stops. Just like that. Like they didn't want to fight. They wanted an easy house. At that point, we went back to Mr. Halverson and demanded improvements. Better locks, reinforced doors, brighter outdoor lighting, security system, the whole thing. We got estimates, about $2,700, and we even offered to split the cost. He talked to the owner. They refused. They said we were welcome to pay for it ourselves, which, no. We weren't going to pour thousands into someone else's property just so we could sleep at night. So we terminated the lease and moved out. The house rented again quickly. Cute place, lovely neighborhood, just a little too close to an area where people apparently felt comfortable treating homes like shopping malls. We were lucky. We only lost the deposit. And then, about 9 months after we left, I get this phone call one evening. A woman, her name was Rachel, asks if I used to live at our old address. I'm like, yeah, why? And she explains that some mail with my name had shown up even after forwarding, and she'd looked me up because I was the only match in the Kansas City phone book. Then she says, I know this is strange, but I needed to talk to someone who lived there before. Rachel tells me she and her roommate, another young attorney, had rented the place after us, and they'd been robbed 3 times in 9 months. 3. They'd gotten into it with Mr. Halverson about safety upgrades, and during one of those arguments he accidentally let something slip. Something like, "This sounds exactly like what the previous tenants asked for." That's when she started digging until she found me. And then, almost like an afterthought, she goes, "Also, can I ask you something weird?" I'm already bracing myself. She says, "Did you ever feel creeped out in that house? Like you were being watched?" And I remember I actually swallowed before I answered. I said, "Watched? Yeah. By who?" And she goes, completely matter of fact, like she's talking about a nosy neighbor. An old creepy guy. And I just sat there on the phone, quiet, because suddenly I could see that upstairs hallway again. The linen closet, the bathroom door, the dim light, and that feeling, like the house had been waiting for you to notice you weren't alone. Hey, so this is a story I meant to tell forever ago, but it only came rushing back to me recently when I was on the phone with my mom, talking about how my great-uncle's Christmas package still hadn't shown up. You know how that goes. One random, ordinary conversation, and suddenly your brain yanks open a dusty drawer you forgot even existed. Anyway, my family has always had these little, "what was that?" moments that sit right on the edge of paranormal. Not constantly, not like some dramatic movie, just enough to make you pause and glance over your shoulder now and then. I don't live in my childhood home anymore. I moved about 6 years ago to a quieter place farther north. Older house, more fields, fewer neighbors. But this story is from back then, from the road I grew up on. Our house sat near a corner. Across the street was our neighbor's house, kind of a weathered brick place, and right by the roadside were 2 tall pine trees that always looked darker than everything around them at night. Our mailbox was out there too, close enough to the road that car headlights would hit it in this quick, bright sweep as you turned onto our street. And apparently, in those headlights, sometimes, there was a girl. My mom and my uncle both described her the exact same way, even though they'd mentioned it years apart, like it was no big deal, like they were talking about a deer they'd seen, or a cat that wandered through the yard. They said she looked young, late teens, maybe early 20s, straight dark hair, shoulder length, and clothes that felt old-fashioned in this really specific way, like a skirt and blouse you'd picture in an old family photo. Not costumey, just dated. She'd be standing near the mailbox, slightly leaning toward the road, as if she was waiting for a car to come from the direction of town. My mom always emphasized this one detail. The girl would lift a hand and tuck her hair behind her ear, like she'd done it 1,000 times. Then she'd fold her arms tight around herself, like she was cold, and stare past the headlights, past the car, like the driver wasn't even there. And the weirdest part? You could only see her in the headlights. Like the dark hid her until that split-second beam lit the pines and the mailbox. And then, once the car passed and the light moved on, she was just gone. Not walking away, not stepping back, just gone. Like someone hit stop on a recording. I never saw her, not once. And I always kind of wanted to, just so I could decide how I felt about it with my own eyes. But it was only my mom and my uncle. And I know what you're thinking. Could have been a story, a family spooky tale. But here's the thing, neither of them had the personality for that kind of performance. My mom has had car anxiety since she was a teenager, after a bad accident. She's not the type to suddenly yell, "Stop!" in the dark for fun. But my dad told me more than once about nights when she'd snap upright in the passenger seat and demand he slam the brakes because she's there again. And my uncle, let's call him Nate, he wasn't exactly sentimental. He wasn't a theatrical guy. But apparently there were nights he'd come home late, whip the car around, and back halfway into the front yard just to angle the headlights back across the street, trying to see her again by the pines. And what always got me about that is, those nights were often after midnight. No audience, no kids watching. If it was some big prank or attention thing, he was committing to it at the weirdest possible times. What actually gave me chills didn't happen on the road. It happened 2 years ago, in my mom's living room, in broad daylight, with her phone in her hand. There had been a report about an unidentified body found back near our hometown. Badly decomposed, unclaimed, the kind of news story that makes everyone go quiet for a second. My dad has this personal reason he always pays attention to things like that. When he was younger, one of his uncles, my great-uncle, just vanished. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. Every time remains are found within a couple hours' drive, my dad calls to see if there's any chance it could be him. It never is, but he still checks. So my mom tells him about this new case, and while he's processing it, she starts scrolling. Just curious, pulling up older missing persons cases from the area. I was sitting right there, half watching, half not, until she made this sound. Not a scream, not even a full gasp, more like her breath just dropped out of her. Her phone actually dipped like it got heavy in her hand, and she called for my dad, fast. The tone in her voice made my stomach tighten immediately because I thought, oh my God, she found something about his uncle, or something worse. My dad comes over, and my mom shoves the screen toward him and says, "That's her. That's the girl." My dad's like, "What girl?" And my mom says it again, sharper this time, like she needed him to understand immediately. "That's the one by the mailbox. That's the one we've been seeing." On her screen was a black and white photo, a young woman, dark straight hair, the same kind of clothes, the same face shape my mom had described for years in this casual, unsettling way. The case details said she was 19, from a nearby town, last seen in our hometown in early winter, late 1970s, right around the holidays. and then found a couple days later, murdered, multiple stab wounds. I remember staring at that phone and feeling this slow, crawling cold behind my ribs. Not the fun kind of spooky, the ugly kind. The kind that makes you realize the world has teeth. Because if my mom was making this up, then she'd been playing the longest, weirdest game imaginable. Decades of consistent detail. Decades of the same description. Years of reacting the same way in the car. And then a perfectly timed reveal. And she's not that person. She never has been. She can't even pretend she likes a meal if she doesn't. So we all just stood there, sort of stunned. Like we'd accidentally stepped into the overlap between two realities. The family ghost story and a real young woman who had actually lived and actually died, and whose face was still out there in records like a bookmark nobody wanted to find. I'm not going to say her real name. It feels wrong. I looked a little deeper and saw she still has family. Siblings, at least. People who might still think about her every December. But I'll tell you this. Ever since that day, whenever I picture that corner, the pines, the mailbox, the way headlights sweep across the roadside, I don't picture a ghost girl like some campfire story. I picture a real person. And I can't decide what's worse. That my mom and uncle saw her at all, or that they only ever saw her for a second, in passing, like she was still waiting for someone to stop. So, quick bit of context before I drop you into it. For years, we had this cat named Hugo. He showed up in our lives sometime in the late 2000s and made it to that ancient wizard age where the vet basically squints at the chart like, how are you even real? He was old. Somewhere around 18, maybe 20, hard to say. Hugo was also the best mouse hunter I've ever seen. And that's not me being sentimental, he was genuinely talented. The thing is, we didn't do outdoor cats. We lived way too close to a road that felt like it ate animals for breakfast, and I couldn't handle the idea of someone not coming home. So we kept our cats indoors and tried to make their world interesting. Cat trees, toys, window perches, all of it. But we did have a mouse problem, and our compromise was this. The cats could go work in the basement if they wanted. And Hugo? Hugo lived for basement duty. He was vocal too. He had this very specific, I'm requesting basement access sound, and he was smart enough to know doors were opened by pushing the handle down. When he wanted back upstairs, he'd get dramatic, standing on his hind legs, paws hooked over the handle, trying to yank it like a little furry burglar. The handle was stiff, so it took effort, but he'd still try. Now, the basement door was in this short little hallway. Basement door, bathroom door beside it, and then a pantry door a step away. It was one of those tight spaces where sounds bounce weirdly, like everything is closer than it should be. Okay, here's where the story actually starts. It was, I want to say 2014-ish, give or take. I was up late, as usual, somewhere around 2:30 or 3 in the morning, sitting on the couch with the whole house quiet in that heavy, asleep kind of way. And then I hear it, that basement door, rattling. Not a gentle, house-settling noise, not a little tap. It sounded like someone was shaking it, testing it, like, let me in, let me out, let me something. My first reaction was irritation, honestly, because at the time, the cats were being treated for flea and worm stuff, and the basement was the one place we really didn't want them wandering around during that. And I was the only one awake. Everyone else had been asleep for hours. So I stand up, already mid-lecture in my head. I'm walking toward the hall like, Hugo, are you kidding me right now? Who put you down there? I get close enough to reach for the handle, and right before my hand touches it, I hear a little meow. From my left, I turn, and there's Hugo, sitting calmly on a shelf by the bathroom, staring at the basement door like he's watching a show. And I swear to you, that moment did something to my spine. Like every bone went, oh, nope. Because if that wasn't Hugo at the basement door, then what was? We had another cat back then, Junie, but I'd literally just stood up from the couch, and Junie had been stretched out right there, dead asleep, not moving. It couldn't have been her. So I turn back to the basement door, and I'm trying to tell myself, okay, draft, pipes, mouse, anything normal. And then the handle starts moving. Not the door shaking, the handle. It jiggles up and down, like someone is trying to press it, failing, trying again. And then it gets more aggressive, like it's frustrated, like something on the other side is learning the mechanics by brute force. And that's when my brain went from investigate to absolutely not. I grabbed the nearest sturdy thing, a wooden chair, and shoved it in front of the door like I was in a low-budget horror movie with a survival instinct. Then I scooped up Hugo, marched to my room, and got in bed with my heart doing kickflips. The rattling stopped maybe a minute after I left, which somehow made it worse, like it had been waiting for an audience. But the handle? No. And then my dad made it so much worse, because when I told him, he goes, very casually, "That handle doesn't work like that. If you saw it moving, it was moving on your side." Like, thank you. That's so much scarier. That means it wasn't something trapped in the basement wanting out. It was something up here, with me, that wanted down there. I truly hoped that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A few months later, my mom admitted she'd heard it too. Late at night, the same hallway, the same strange impatience. And after that, when it happened again, Hugo would actually change his little observation spot. He started perching closer to my room, like he had decided the best seat for the basement door's performance was right where I could see it too. Years passed. Life moved on in that way it does. And then, when Hugo got really old, he got sick. He rallied for a while. He improved, but he never fully bounced back. He lost muscle, moved slower, and he stopped hunting. It was like he finally decided he'd done enough work for one lifetime. During that stretch, we got close in a way we hadn't before. He'd always been independent, kind of, I love you from across the room. But in the end, he chose me. He'd come find me, settle near me, lean into my hand like we were making up for time. Eventually, his body just couldn't keep going. We lost him. It wrecked me. When the vet returned him to us, it was in this small, plain urn. Nothing fancy, just simple and heavy with meaning. We put it on that shelf in the hallway, the same shelf where he used to sit and watch the basement door. It felt right, like his post. Not long after, my family started fixing up a little farmhouse outside town. We didn't sell the old house. My sisters moved in to keep an eye on it while things transitioned. And then, right before one of the last big moves, I'm in the kitchen at the old house when I hear it again. That basement door, rattling. I walk toward the hallway, and then there's this loud, sharp bam, like something hit wood hard. When I get there, my mom and my brother and my younger sister are already standing in the hall, staring at the door like they don't trust their own eyes. I go, "What was that noise?" And my sister, still staring, says, "Something just flew off the shelf and hit the pantry door." I look down, and there's Hugo's urn on the floor, right in front of the pantry. And listen, there were other things on that shelf. Random little decorations, old clutter, stuff that could have fallen if something bumped it. But the only thing that came off, like it was chosen, was that. That was the first time I didn't try to rationalize it. I just felt this hot wave of anger, like a protective reflex. My mom crouched down, hands shaking, picking the urn up like it was fragile glass. And I, without thinking, I turned and yelled at the basement door. I yelled, "Leave him alone. He's already gone." Not witty, not brave, just raw. The door kept rattling for another minute or two, like it wanted the last word, and then it stopped. After that, my mom moved the urn to a different place, safer, away from that hallway. Now, these days, I spend most of my time at the farmhouse. It's quieter here. Peaceful, honestly. Nothing has ever happened here that feels like that. But the old house? It's still the old house. Because tonight, well, actually a couple hours ago, my mom and I were doing renovation work at the farmhouse, patching and smoothing drywall like normal people pretending our lives are normal. And her phone starts going off. Text notification after text notification. Rapid fire. Like someone was hammering the screen in a panic. And my mom goes, "That's your sister." Because the only person who sends messages like that is the one who's scared. And I can hear my sister's voice through the speaker. Shaky, breathy, terrified. She says the basement door in the old house started rattling again. She went to the hallway, watched it for a few seconds, trying to decide if she was imagining it. And then, like it got tired of being subtle, the door handle just fell off. Not came loose, not wiggled, just dropped, like something undid it. She's packing an overnight bag. She doesn't want to be alone there tonight. She's coming up to the farmhouse until someone else is home with her. And honestly, I don't blame her. Because once you've stood in a quiet house at 3 in the morning, watching a door handle move like it has hands of its own, you don't forget that feeling. Not ever. So I literally just found this group, and I've been sitting here like, okay, I have to get this off my chest, because this is hands down the creepiest stretch of my entire life. This all happened when I was in high school, back when I lived with my parents in this older house in a tiny town in northern Kansas. And I've always been one of those people who's kind of open to weird stuff. Like, I grew up on ghost shows. I lived for scary movies. I was that kid counting down to Halloween like it was a national holiday. So when two of my best friends, Kelsey and Marin, were like, "We should do a Ouija board," I didn't hesitate for even a second. Which, yeah, looking back, not my proudest decision. We went out late at night, because of course we did, and our town had this small cemetery tucked behind the old church, like right there in town. So naturally, that's where we went. Teenagers have zero sense of self-preservation, I swear. I'm not even going to drag you through every detail of the session, because honestly, the part that freaks me out isn't what happened there, it's what happened after. But just so you get the vibe, we heard this creepy little kid giggle, like close enough that it made the hair on my neck stand up, and the board spelled out something that made us all go quiet. We shut it down, packed up, and went home acting tough. But we were all shaken. And the second I got home, it was like I hadn't come back alone. My brother Owen and I had bedrooms in the basement, and our rooms shared a wall. It was the middle of winter, freezing cold, and we had this little space heater on wheels down there, one of those dinky ones that slides around on the hard floor if you nudge it. That night, I heard it rolling, not turning on, not clicking, rolling, like it was being pulled across the floor. And listen, every scary movie has taught me one thing. The moment you go investigate the mysterious sound, you become a cautionary tale. So I did the only thing my terrified 16-year-old brain could think of. I stayed perfectly still and pulled my blanket over my head like that was going to save me from anything. That was night 1. After that, it wasn't a single weird noise here and there. It started stacking. Night after night, it got bolder. Outside my room, mounted to one of the basement posts, we had this ancient manual pencil sharpener, the kind with the crank handle you spin. No idea why we even still had it, but it was there. And it started turning at night too. Not fast, just slow enough that you could hear the metal mechanism whining. like someone was patiently cranking it in the dark. Then it moved into my room. I had this glass jar, like a little vintage jelly jar, sitting on my dresser in the closet. And at night I'd hear it scraping, back and forth, on wood, over and over. I made this rule for myself early on. Don't acknowledge it. Don't talk to it, don't react, don't even look. Like if I pretended hard enough, maybe it would get bored and leave me alone. But it didn't get bored. The longer I ignored it, the more aggressive it got. Like it was mad I wouldn't pay attention. And one morning, after a particularly awful night, I finally looked. And there were fresh scratch marks gouged into the top of the dresser where that jar had been dragging itself around. That was the moment my stomach really dropped. Like, okay, this isn't my imagination. Still, I didn't tell my family. My parents believed in paranormal stuff in a casual way, like, oh yeah, spirits exist, kind of way. But they'd always insisted the house was fine. And I didn't want to be the dramatic kid who watched too many horror movies and freaked herself out. My room had that old wood paneling, and I'd hear tiny taps right near my headboard, right next to where I was lying. Not in the walls like plumbing, on the paneling, like knuckles. Sometimes it would pause, and the second my body relaxed, it would start again. And then there was this other thing that makes my skin crawl even now, because it wasn't just sounds. You know that feeling when a cat jumps onto your bed and pads around in circles before settling down? I felt that, on my mattress. Like something climbed onto the bed and walked around near my legs. Except there was no cat, no pet, nothing. And then, the whispers started. I'd be lying there in the dark, frozen, staring at the ceiling, and I'd hear my name. Soft, dragged out, like someone trying to get my attention without waking anyone else up. From my closet, every single night. And it wasn't just that either. On the left side of my bed, I had this big wooden bookshelf my grandpa had built for me. On top of it sat this small, flat-screen TV, and the buttons on the back were ridiculously loud when you pressed them, like a sharp plastic click that echoed. Those buttons started clicking at night too. So picture me, hearing the heater roll, the pencil sharpener crank, tapping beside my head, whispers in the closet, TV buttons clicking, and feeling something shift onto the bed like it belonged there. I was exhausted, jumpy, constantly on edge. I'd go to school on 2 hours of sleep and try to act normal while my brain screamed, "Do not go home." And then I hit my breaking point. One night, I had this nightmare that felt too real. So real it didn't even feel like a dream. In it, I was in my room, exactly as it was in real life. Same shadows, same corners, and as I looked around, I saw them. A little girl curled up in the corner of my closet, hugging her knees. A little boy at the side of my bed, pressing down on the mattress like he was testing it. A tall, dark figure crouched behind my bookshelf near the TV, and another shadowy figure in the opposite corner, tapping on the wall. Tap, tap, tap. I woke up shaking, like full-body, teeth-chattering shaking. The next morning, I finally told my brother Owen because I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I started describing the dream, and I swear to you, his face went pale. His eyes got huge, and he cut me off mid-sentence and said, "Wait, was the little boy by your bed wearing..." And then he described him. Exactly. Down to the details I hadn't even said yet. We had the same nightmare. That's when everything spilled out. I told him about the heater, the pencil sharpener, the jar, the tapping, the whispers, the TV buttons, the bed thing, everything. And he just nodded because he'd heard it too. Then he told me something that made my throat go dry. He said he'd seen me sit straight up in bed at night and whisper back, like I was having conversations in my sleep with whatever was in my room. I had absolutely no memory of it. None. But he was dead serious. like he'd watched it happen more than once. And then he told me about the storage room. Across the basement from his bedroom was this little storage space that didn't even have a door, just a dark opening. I'd always hated it, like irrationally. Even walking past it made me feel sick, like the air was wrong there. I never understood why. I just avoided looking into it at night. His room faced it. He said he would wake up sometimes and see a shadowy man standing in that doorway. Not moving, just standing there. Some nights it was in the storage room opening. Some nights it was halfway between the storage room and his bed. And some nights, it was standing in the doorway of my room, staring in. I never saw it. Not once. Which somehow made it worse, because it felt like it was choosing to hide from me. We finally told our parents. My dad brushed it off, classic. But my mom got really quiet, and she admitted that when she was home alone sometimes, she'd hear faint whispering from downstairs. And once or twice, she'd heard someone call out, "Mom?" from the basement like it was me, even though I wasn't home. After we talked about it openly, things started happening less. Not immediately, but it wasn't constant the way it had been. One moment sticks with me though. My boyfriend at the time, Ethan, who's my husband now, was over one night, and Owen and I were telling him everything, like really laying it all out. Halfway through, Ethan put his hands to his temples and was like, "Please stop. I've got this horrible headache all of a sudden." We stopped talking, and I'm not exaggerating. The headache vanished, like it turned off. Eventually, I moved out. I lived in an apartment for a while, and I did have a couple weird things happen. Like one time, 3 different clocks in 3 different rooms fell off their hooks and shattered within minutes of each other, which was a lot. But nothing ever reached that level again. And here's the part that makes me feel weirdly guilty. My mom and my brother told me that the very first night I wasn't living in that house anymore, everything stopped completely. No whispers, no tapping, no heater, nothing. Like whatever it was focused on me. So I don't know if I left something behind there, or if it was attached to me for a while and then gave up, or if the whole Ouija board thing cracked something open and it took time to close. All I know is this: I will never touch a Ouija board again as long as I live. And I am deeply, genuinely grateful that whatever that was isn't with me anymore. So, I don't really tell this story at parties. It's not that kind of spooky. It's the kind that sits in your ribs for years and only shows itself when you're alone at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why your childhood memories feel haunted around the edges. When I was about 6, maybe 7, I got hit with a fever so hard it came on like a wave. This was early 90s, small town, not much money, and medical care was, let's just say it had limits. The clinic shut around dinner time, and after that, calling for the doctor felt like flipping a coin. Sometimes he'd come. Sometimes he'd come in a state you'd rather not see anyone holding medical equipment in. I knew that firsthand because one summer I wiped out on my bike and split my scalp open. Next thing I know, this man is stitching me up, and I swear he missed more than he hit. I still remember the sharp, wrong pinch when the needle didn't go where it was supposed to, like he was sewing the air and accidentally catching me in the process. I hated that man with a passion that only a kid can carry. Anyway, back to the fever. My mom told me later she was about to call him, even though she didn't want to, because my temperature was climbing fast and I was drifting in and out like a radio losing signal. But then, just as she was reaching for the phone, my symptoms started easing up, like somebody turned a dial down. And the whole thing got filed away as one scary night, and life moved on. I didn't even remember it. Years later, 12, maybe 13, We were watching something on TV where someone was burning up with a fever. I asked, casually, "Did I ever get a fever like that when I was little?" My mom paused, just stopped what she was doing and looked at me in this really strange way. "You don't remember?" she asked. I laughed and said, "No, why would I?" And she said, very quietly, "What you said that night scared me more than the fever." That made my stomach drop a little because you know your mom's fear as a kid. It's like weather. When it shifts, you feel it. She asked me again, "Do you remember what you said you saw?" I told her no, not even a flicker. So she sat down and told me. She said I was in bed, skin blazing, eyes glassy, and she was perched on the edge of the mattress with a cold, damp cloth, pressing it gently to my forehead, just trying to keep me comfortable, trying not to panic. And then, out of nowhere, I sat bolt upright. I pointed over her shoulder, like my whole body was being yanked by something I could see that she couldn't. And I screamed, "Mom, turn around! It's behind you!" She told me the look on my face, pure terror, like I'd seen something that didn't belong in the world, went straight through her. She said she felt cold all over, even though the room was warm. She also said she didn't turn around, not because she didn't believe me, but because she was terrified that if she did, it would make it real. Like acknowledging it would invite it in. So she stayed facing me, voice steady, saying, "There's nothing there. You're okay. It's just your fever." But I kept crying and shouting, "It's coming closer! Mom, it's coming closer!" And the way she described it, this part still gets me. She said my eyes stopped focusing on the corner of the room and started staring right over her shoulder. Like whatever I thought I saw had moved. Like it was right behind her now. She told me she couldn't take it anymore. She pulled me against her chest, wrapped her arms around me tight, and covered my eyes with her hand like she could physically block whatever it was. And she said either I snapped out of it, or whatever I was seeing left us alone. That should have been the end of it. Just a fever story. A scary little family anecdote you roll your eyes at as you get older. But then there's the other part. A few years after that, around 9 or 10, there was this group of us who always hung out together on our estate. We were that tight little neighborhood pack, always outside, always daring each other into dumb stuff. One rainy afternoon, a bunch of us were at my mate Callum's house while his mom ran to the shops. His older brother was babysitting, which basically meant he told us not to bother him and disappeared into his room to play his console at full volume. Someone found Callum's older sister's Ouija board tucked away in a drawer. And because we were kids who'd been watching too much paranormal TV and thought fear was the same thing as fun, we decided, obviously, we were going to use it. At first it was jokes, stupid questions. Who's going to be famous? Who's going to marry who? Who's going to be rich? And everybody was giggling because you could tell someone was nudging the planchette. But then we got serious in that dramatic way kids do, like we were suddenly researchers conducting a scientific experiment. We all agreed. No pushing. No messing around. And after a bit of whispering and snickering, this kid, Jasper, blurts out, "Call the house phone." Not "give us a sign," not "move the glass," not "knock on the wall," just "call the house phone." And I swear to you, the planchette shot across the board and landed on yes, like it was yanked there. And then the phone rang. Instantly. Like no pause. No, maybe it'll ring in a minute. Just, yes, ring. Every one of us froze with our hands still on that plastic thing. The laughter died so fast it was like someone unplugged it. The phone kept ringing and nobody moved. It felt wrong to answer, like picking up would complete whatever we'd started. And then from the older brother's room, we hear him shout, furious, Answer the bloody phone! So Jasper, because he was more scared of getting yelled at than of ghosts, snatched it up and put it to his ear. And his face just drained, white as paper. He slammed the receiver down like it burned him and rushed back to the board, breath shaking, going, "I'm done. I'm done. I'm not playing anymore." We demanded to know what he heard. He said it was low and crackly, like it was coming through water, but underneath it there was this voice, rough, almost snarling, saying something that sounded like, "Zuzu, Zuzu." And the second he said it out loud, the phone rang again. Nobody answered that time, not even with the older brother shouting. We just tore the board back into the box like it was poisonous and sat there in this awful silence until the ringing stopped and the front door opened. Callum's mum walked in with shopping bags and immediately went, "What's wrong with you lot? Why are you all so quiet?" Then she looked at Callum like she already knew. "What did you break?" she snapped. We didn't explain. We couldn't. We just muttered excuses, grabbed our coats, and scattered like our lives depended on it. And outside, we all agreed, right there on the pavement, we don't talk about it again. We didn't. Not for years. Then comes the last part, the part that makes me feel sick, because it's the one that grew teeth. When we were about 11, the older kids, me included, were the cool group. And we did that gross older kid thing where we made little ones prove themselves with initiation rituals. Nothing we thought was serious at the time, but looking back, we were idiots. Cruel in that careless way kids can be. They called it the hanging shed. The story went that somewhere outside town, there was an old shed left standing from centuries ago, from back when the first houses were built. The family who owned the land had supposedly done evil rituals, and the church people, townsfolk, destroyed their house and forced them out. But the shed got overlooked and stayed there, rotting in the field, waiting. And every 100 years, on the anniversary of the house being torn down, the shed would claim someone. A man would leave his home in the night, walk miles in the dark, and hang himself from a beam. The detail that made everyone go quiet was this: there was no ladder, and the beam was too high. And every time it happened, people said there was no way someone could have tied it up there alone. One of the older lads, Dylan, finished telling it, let the silence stretch, and then said, "I know where it is." And like moths, we followed. He led us out to this field where there really was a shed standing by itself, small, wooden, old-looking. The older kids knew it probably belonged to a farmer nearby, but the little ones didn't. And you could see it on their faces. They wanted it to be the hanging shed. They wanted the story to be true. So we made it into a test. We told them, if you go inside, close the door, and stay longer than anyone else, you're in. It was already getting dark, early evening, cold air, that kind of dim light where everything looks more sinister than it should. And that shed had no windows. Once you stepped inside and the door shut, you were swallowed by black. One kid refused outright and backed away, shaking. We teased him, of course. Another went in first, and, because we were awful, we crept around banging on the walls, scraping sticks, whispering nonsense until he burst out in tears. We pretended to look impressed, like, "Ooh, did you hear something?" Like we hadn't been the ones making it. Then it was the last kid's turn, a boy called Noah. Noah wasn't really in our group, but everyone liked him. Quiet, brave, trying hard not to show fear. He stepped into the shed, and we shut the door. And this time, this is important, we didn't do anything. No banging, no whispering, nothing. We stood around talking about random stuff, already losing interest. Someone counted seconds for a bit, then stopped. It felt like he'd been in there ages, long enough that we started getting impatient and cold and hungry. We were about to open the door and call it a day, when we heard Noah screaming from inside. Not joking screaming, not boo screaming, real screaming. He was pounding on the door, shouting, "Let me out! Let me out!" We yelled back, "It's not locked!" Because it wasn't. There was no lock on the outside. He could have opened it, but he kept shrieking like he couldn't find the handle, like it wasn't there, like the door wasn't a door anymore. So we rushed in, grabbed the handle, and pulled. It wouldn't budge. I remember the panic that flashed through all of us at once, because suddenly we weren't playing a game. We were standing outside a shed with a child sobbing inside it. We yanked and yanked until it finally gave way, so suddenly that we all tumbled backwards into each other, a heap in the mud. And Noah came flying out like he'd been shot from a cannon. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. He sprinted across the field like something was on his heels. We chased him, shouting his name, and when we finally caught up, he was shaking so badly he could barely stand. "What happened?" we asked. "What did you see?" He stared at us with this blank, stunned horror and said, "Once, only once, I saw the noose." And then he refused to talk about it ever again. I didn't think about that shed for nearly a decade. Then one morning, when I was 19, I got a knock at my flat door. I opened it and saw a couple of lads from the old estate, faces pale, eyes red like they hadn't slept. They told me Noah was dead. He'd hanged himself the night before, in a shed. A farmer found him in the morning. He was 17, and the whole town went strange after that, quiet in the worst way. There were rumors, and the police asked questions, and people kept saying the same thing over and over. How could he have done it alone? They investigated it for months. There was talk of foul play, talk of someone helping, someone forcing, someone staging. But in the end, it was ruled a suicide. And I know, logically, I know coincidences happen. Tragedies happen. People suffer in ways you never see coming. But every so often, late at night, my mind drifts back to a cold towel on my forehead. My mum refusing to turn around. A phone ringing at the exact wrong moment. And a shed in a dark field. And I can't help wondering, just for a second, just a tiny, sickening second, what if, that night when we were kids, we really did find it? Okay. So I'm going to tell you something that still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. A little while back, maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago, I was home with my parents on a quiet Saturday. I'm 23, and I have this boring little weekend habit where I like to fill up my tank before the week starts. There's this grocery store gas station a few minutes away where it's usually a couple cents cheaper. So I told my dad, "I'm just going to run out for gas. I'll be right back." And my dad, love him truly, but he has this thing where he acts like I'm going into the wilderness every time I leave the driveway. Like I've been pumping my own gas for years. I don't need an escort mission. So I leave, and instead of taking the quickest route, I do what I always do. I take the longer loop to avoid this annoying left turn that stresses me out. It turns a short drive into a slightly longer one, but I prefer it. It's calmer. I'm a few minutes into the drive when I notice a car behind me. Really close. And I'm not even exaggerating. Close enough that I could see the driver's face clearly in my rearview mirror. And here's the thing. My parents' car is distinct. It's this pale blue-gray color that you don't see often. Like someone tried to describe storm cloud but made it prettier. You can spot it from far away. So when I see that exact car behind me, my first thought is the most annoyed thought imaginable. Oh my God, they're following me. I roll my eyes so hard it almost hurt. In my head I'm going, are you serious? You think I can't handle a gas pump? I'm literally going to stand next to my car for 3 minutes and swipe a card. I slow down at a stop sign and I angle my side mirror just a little, trying to get a better look without turning my whole head around like a paranoid person. And I swear to you, it looked exactly like my parents. My mom in the passenger seat, my dad driving. Same hair, same faces, same posture. Even the way my dad holds his shoulders when he drives, kind of stiff, like he's bracing for somebody to cut him off. But something was wrong. Their faces were completely blank. Not neutral like we're just driving. Blank like there was nothing happening behind their eyes. No irritation, no focus, no warmth. Just empty. You know when you see someone and you can tell they're there? Like you can feel the person inside the body? This was the opposite of that. It looked like them, but it didn't feel like them. Like somebody put their faces on two mannequins and told them to sit in a car. And it freaked me out. But in that weird way where your brain tries to protect you by pretending it's fine. So I tell myself, okay, weird lighting, weird angle, whatever. I keep driving. I'm thinking maybe they'll pull up next to me at the gas station and I'll have this whole awkward moment where I'm like, seriously? And they'll laugh it off. But as I get closer to the station, I check my mirror again, and they're gone. Just not there anymore. And I know what you're thinking. They turned off somewhere, took a different road. Maybe you lost them. Except I had been watching them. They were right behind me, and then suddenly they weren't. No turn signal, no slowing down, no obvious side street where they could have slipped away. It felt like a scene got cut, and it shows my parents at home. At home. Still there. I just stared at my screen like it was going to correct itself. Like the dot would move and be like, just kidding, here they are. But it didn't. It stayed planted at the house. And the math wasn't mathing. Even if they'd turned around the second I saw them, even if they'd floored it, even if every traffic light magically turned green, there was no way they could have been back home that fast. So now I'm pumping gas, heart doing this slow, heavy thump, and my brain is flipping between explanations like channels on a TV. Maybe the app glitched. Maybe it wasn't them. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm not remembering the car color right. But I am remembering it right. I know their car. I know my parents. I drive home and I'm quiet the whole way, like I don't want to invite the weirdness back by talking about it out loud. When I get home, everything is normal. The house sounds normal. The TV is on. The vibe is safe. Later that night, I try to bring it up casually because I don't want to sound like I'm losing it. So I'm like laughing, trying to make it light. Hey, Mom, why were you and Dad tailing me earlier? And she looks at me like I just asked her why she used to be a pirate. She goes, what are you talking about? So I tell her the whole thing, how I saw their car behind me, how I saw them, how it freaked me out. And she just keeps shaking her head, more confused by the second. Then she calls for my dad, like she needs a witness. And my dad comes in and he's like, we haven't left the house all day. Not defensive, not teasing, just matter of fact. And I'm standing there trying to laugh, trying to act like it's a funny misunderstanding. But inside I feel this cold little drop, because now I don't have a neat explanation. Because if it wasn't them, then who did I see? And why did it look so much like my parents, down to the smallest details, but without any of the life that makes them my parents? That's the part that gets me. Not just that I saw people who looked like them. It's that for a few seconds, I felt like I was looking at something pretending to be them. And I know how dramatic that sounds. I know. But that's honestly the closest way I can explain the feeling. It's been sitting in the back of my mind ever since, like a splinter you can't quite dig out. And every time I think about those blank expressions in the mirror, I get this urge to check behind me again, just to make sure the road is normal, because I still don't know what I saw. And I don't know what's worse, having no explanation or having one. Okay, so I need to tell you something that happened tonight, and I'm still kind of buzzing from it. Like, I'm sitting at home right now, warm and safe, and even thinking about it makes my skin prickle. So, some quick background. My partner Maya and I have this dog. He's a 5-year-old Siberian Husky Malamute mix named Coda. Big, fluffy goofball. And if you know Huskies, you know they don't really bark so much as commentary. He's a talker, a howler, a dramatic little opera singer. But here's the thing, Coda almost never barks. Like, I can count on one hand the times I've heard it in all the years we've had him. He's friendly with basically everyone. So if he ever barks at a person, that's not just unusual, that's wrong. Anyway, every evening around 6:15, we take him on this long walk at a small neighborhood park nearby. It's not some popular city park, more like a tucked-away trail loop that mostly locals use. We recognize most of the regular dog walkers, even if we don't know their names. It's usually calm, familiar, routine. Not tonight. Tonight, it was cold. Like that biting winter cold where the air feels sharp. We're in the Pacific Northwest, and the fog lately has been pretty heavy. But when we stepped outside, we both just stopped and went, whoa. The fog was thick. Not spooky movie thick, more like the world ends 10 feet away from you thick. The streetlights weren't even really cutting through it. And I remember thinking, as soon as we turned onto the path, I really should have brought a flashlight. So we're walking, talking about normal stuff. Work, errands, dumb little day things, while Coda does his usual routine, sniffing like the ground is telling him secrets. It's quiet in the park, which isn't weird this time of year. Most people do their dog walks before dark. I'm a few steps ahead of Maya. I keep turning back when I talk, just out of habit. We're maybe 100 yards in when I turn back again, and I swear my stomach just dropped. Because behind Maya, maybe 8 or 10 yards back, there's someone. Just suddenly there. A small person, maybe around 5'2", walking toward us. They're holding something bright, like a phone or small flashlight, but the light is aimed up toward their face. And I'm telling you, I couldn't see their face at all. Not even a hint. The hood they had on was huge, like oversized, and it hung low. The light made it worse, washed out everything except this blank shadow under the hood. They had this weird combination of clothes, too, like a colorful, drapey outer layer over dark pants, and then this bulky hoodie on top. I couldn't tell their age, their gender, nothing. Just a shape walking through the fog with a bright light aimed at their own head. And what freaked me out most was the timing. Because seconds before, when I'd last looked back, there was nobody. This trail is open. No trees right up against it, no place to duck behind. And yet somehow this person just appeared like they'd stepped out of the fog itself. So I quietly tell Maya, "Hey, let's step off the trail and let them pass." We move into the grass with Coda, acting casual, like no big deal. And the person walks by us. Except, they don't look up. Not once. They don't glance sideways. They don't acknowledge us at all. No nod, no quick, "Evening," nothing. They just keep walking forward with that light held up, face completely hidden, moving in this stiff, almost mechanical way. It felt robotic. That's the only word I have for it. We wait a minute or two, let Coda do his thing, then we get back on the trail. Still no flashlight. Still that fog swallowing everything. About a minute later, we round this bend, and I see the same person again, standing dead still in the middle of the trail ahead of us. We stop too because what do you even do? We just stand there watching. They take a couple steps, stop again. A couple steps, stop again. Like they're glitching. And this is when Koda's whole vibe changes. He goes stiff. His tail changes position, lower, tense. He starts whining under his breath, like anxious little sounds he almost never makes. His body language is screaming that something is wrong. Maya and I don't even need to talk about it. We just automatically step off the trail again and do this big, looping detour through the grass to reconnect with the trail farther ahead, maybe 50 or 60 yards past the person. The whole time, I keep looking back, and that figure is still just standing there. We end up near this little kid's play area, slides and climbing stuff, and we let Koda sniff around in the wood chips for a second, trying to calm him down, trying to convince ourselves we're overreacting. And then we hear it. A dog barking like absolutely losing its mind, coming from back the way we came. A second later, I see a guy appear through the fog, pulling his dog hard on the leash, like dragging it away from something. The dog is lunging and barking and snapping the air, full chaos. And the guy keeps saying, "I'm so sorry, he never does this, I don't know what's gotten into him." He looks embarrassed, but also shaken, like he wants out of there. He passes the same hooded person, who is still holding that light up, still not looking at anyone, and the person doesn't react, doesn't flinch, doesn't even turn their head. The guy and his dog basically hurry out through the nearest exit, and then it's just us, and the fog, and that figure. And that's when it gets worse, because the person starts moving in this strange pattern, walking backward a few steps, stopping, then forward a few steps, stopping, turning around, then turning back, like a messed up metronome. Then suddenly they turn and walk away. 5 seconds later they stop, turn around and walk toward us. Stop again. I'm just standing there staring like my brain can't file what I'm seeing. Maya says, very calmly but very firmly, "Let's go. Now." And right as we start moving, Koda explodes. He bolts toward the figure so hard the leash snaps tight and nearly yanks Maya off balance. I shout, "Koda, stop!" He stops, barely, and then he unleashes these deep, aggressive barks I have never heard from him. Not once, not ever. He's leaning forward, teeth showing, full defensive posture, like he's ready to launch. And the figure starts pacing, fast, back and forth, still with that light up, still never looking up, never turning their head, like they're pretending nothing is happening while moving like a wind-up toy. Maya and I look at each other, and we both say it at the same time. We need to leave. So we get moving toward the next exit path, and Maya is basically hauling Koda away while he refuses to turn his body. He's walking sideways, straining, barking non-stop, eyes locked on that person the entire time like he can't let them out of his sight. It takes everything to get him out of the park, and even once we're on the road heading home, he keeps looking back and pulling, like he wants to go back, or like he's scared something will follow. He only finally relaxes when the park disappears completely into the fog behind us. And the whole way home, Maya and I are just talking over each other, trying to make it make sense, because we've walked that trail hundreds of times, and nothing like that has ever happened. But tonight felt like we crossed paths with something that didn't belong there. Hey, hi, I'm Marina, and I'm still kind of shaky even saying this out loud. I honestly never thought I'd be the type of person to share a story like this, mostly because I'm the rational one in my friend group. I'm a model, and a lot of my work is self-shot content, usually in my own place where everything feels familiar and controlled. But a few weeks back, I got this itch to do something different, something that looked a little more high-end and cinematic. So I rented this gorgeous apartment for the night, really modern, sleek furniture, polished floors, and these massive windows that made the whole city look like it was sparkling. You know that kind of view where you just stand there for a second and feel like you're inside a movie? That. At first, everything was normal. I set up my ring light and a softer side light, got my tripod straight, checked my angles, hit record. Easy. But the quiet in that place felt too clean, like the air was holding its breath. And every time I glanced toward the windows, especially when I caught my own reflection, I'd get this weird little shiver, like I'd just stepped into a colder room. The kind of chill that makes your skin tighten. I tried to laugh it off. New space, nighttime nerves, city lights playing tricks, whatever. Then, in the middle of a take, my camera just shut off. No warning. No low battery. Nothing. It shouldn't have happened. I remember standing there with my hands half raised like, seriously? Because it was fully charged and working perfectly minutes earlier. I turned it back on and went to check the clip, mostly to see where it cut out. And I wish I hadn't, because in the video, behind me, there's this huge window, and in that glass, reflected clear as day, is a face. Not mine. This pale, hollow-looking face with these sunken eyes, and this smile that didn't look like a person smiling. It wasn't even scary in a boo kind of way. It was scary in a wrong way, like it didn't belong in a human expression. My stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. I replayed it again, and again, and again. I even leaned closer to the screen like that would somehow change what I was seeing. I kept trying to explain it. Maybe it was a weird light flare. Maybe my own reflection warped. Maybe something outside the building. But here's the thing. The face looked like it was looking at me, not just floating there in the glass, like it had intention. I panicked and deleted the clip. Immediately. Like if it was gone, it couldn't follow me. I know that sounds ridiculous, but in that moment, I wasn't thinking logically. I was thinking like a cornered animal. I told myself, finish your shoot, don't be dramatic. So I tried, but once I hit record again, I started hearing things. First, this soft snap from the kitchen area, like someone lightly cracked a knuckle or bumped a cabinet. I stood still, listening, holding my breath. Then came the footsteps. Not loud, almost careful, like someone walking in socks down a hallway, trying not to be noticed. I called out, "Hello?" in the dumbest, smallest voice. No answer. And I know what you're thinking. Maybe it was another guest, maybe the host, maybe a neighbor. But I had checked in alone. The door was locked, and the apartment was one of those places where you can see most of the space from the living room. There wasn't anywhere someone could just casually stand without me noticing. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely steady the tripod. And then, I did the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I looked at the window again. Not directly outside, at the reflection, and I saw something move behind me. That was it. That was the moment my brain went, nope, we're done. I didn't even pack properly. I grabbed my phone, my bag, and whatever equipment I could carry in one trip. I left a light stand behind, and I think one of my lenses was still on the table. I didn't care. I just needed out. I remember practically running down the hallway to the elevator, jabbing the button like it was taking forever on purpose. And even when the doors closed, I still felt like something was right behind me, just out of sight. Since that night, I haven't slept the same. Every time I close my eyes, I see that face in the glass. The too wide smile, the hollow stare. And the worst part is, I brought the feeling home with me. Because now, sometimes, I'll be in my own apartment, my safe place, and I'll catch myself turning around for no reason, like I'm expecting to see someone standing there. And I hate admitting this, but there are moments where I swear the room gets that same kind of quiet, like the air is holding its breath again. So I'm telling you because I don't know what to do with it anymore. I don't know if it was something paranormal, or if fear and stress made my brain fill in blanks, but I know what I saw in that reflection, and I know how it felt. Have you ever had something like that happen? Like, not just being scared, but feeling like you were being noticed? So this happened maybe 4-ish years ago, and I swear, I still get that icy, prickly feeling just thinking about it. Okay, quick setup. My buddy Evan asked if I wanted to come with him to his dad's place for the afternoon. We get there, and his dad's like, "Hey, I'm going out of town for the weekend. Anniversary trip. Can you guys house sit?" And of course we say yes. Easy. Evan tells me he's going to jump in the shower real fast, so I'm just hanging out in the spare bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling on my phone. His little pug, Daisy, climbs up next to me and plops down like she owns the place. And then, out of nowhere, Daisy stands straight up, stiff as a board. She turns her head toward the closet, like laser-focused, and just stares. The closet door is cracked open, dark inside, and she starts this low growl that doesn't even sound like her. It's not playful. It's not, "Someone's at the door." It's, "Warning." Then she barks, like full-on, furious barking at the closet. And I remember thinking, oh, awesome. Of course. The dog sees something I don't. A couple days later, it's the night we're actually house-sitting. Evan's dad is already gone. Evan and I are wiped because we'd been out late the night before. Some show downtown, loud crowd, barely any sleep. We're back in the spare room, getting ready to crash. Door open because we've got this box fan wedged in the doorway to move air through the hall. The TV's on low, just enough background noise to drift off. And Evan keeps sitting up a little and going, "Did you just see that?" And I'm like, "See what?" And he goes, super casually, like it's no big deal. "That guy, he keeps peeking around the door at us." I didn't see anything. I genuinely thought he was just exhausted and jumpy. So I'm like, "Dude, go to sleep." Eventually he does. He passes out. And that's when I start seeing it. Not like a full person walking in or anything, more like a shape. A head and shoulder kind of silhouette, just barely leaning around the doorway from the hall. I'd glance up, and it would pull back, like it knew. So I'd stare at the doorway, heart thudding, telling myself my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then I'd look down at the TV for a second, look back up, and there it was again. And every single time I caught it, it would duck away like, "Nope, you're not allowed to see me." This happened over and over, 4, 5 times. Enough that I wasn't questioning it anymore. I was just lying there thinking, "Please don't come in. Please don't come in." And then, like someone flipped a switch, Evan's legs start shaking. Not a little twitch, like rhythmic, violent shaking. The kind where your brain immediately goes to worst-case scenarios. Then it spreads. His whole body starts doing it. And Daisy, who'd been asleep, launches upright and jumps right onto his chest, barking in his face like she's trying to drag his soul back into his body. She's going crazy. I lean over and start shaking him. "Evan, Evan, Evan," saying his name over and over. His eyes open wide, but there is nothing behind them. He's looking through me, not at me. And then he starts making this sound, like he's trying to yell but can't. It starts small, almost strangled, then gets louder and louder until it's this awful, strained, rising noise that makes my stomach drop. I shake him again, harder, and finally he snaps out of it like a diver breaking the surface. He gulps air and goes, Just give me a second. Then he looks toward the foot of the bed and says, dead serious, "Didn't you just see that guy standing there?" And I'm like, "Evan, you were staring at me. There was no guy at the foot of the bed." Later, I found out Evan gets sleep paralysis and night terrors, especially at his dad's place. But I didn't know that then. All I knew was what I felt. The room wasn't normal anymore. And here's the part where I'll probably sound ridiculous, but whatever. My mom used to read all those old paranormal books, and one thing she always said stuck with me. If something is trapped or lingering, you can tell it to go toward the light. Like, give it permission to leave. So I get up, trying to act brave even though my knees are basically water, and I walk out into the living room. And I say, out loud, something like, "You're scaring me. I don't want you here. If you can go, go. If there's a light, go to it." From the bedroom, Evan yells, half laughing, "Yeah, go toward the TV." And I snapped at him, like actually angry. "Don't do that. Don't joke, seriously." I go back into the room and sit on the bed again. And from that moment on, for the next hour, maybe more, it was like the room kept getting invaded in waves. Every 5 to 10 minutes you'd feel it. The air would change. The pressure would shift, like someone had put a heavy blanket over the whole room. The temperature would drop, not like, "Oh, it's cooler," but like the warmth got pulled out of the space. The energy felt mean, irritated, like we were somewhere we weren't welcome. Both of us would get goosebumps so intense it was painful, like every hair on my arms and legs was standing straight up. It felt like something was circling us, swirling around the bed, angry as hell. And then it would leave, and the room would loosen again, normal-ish. Evan eventually fell back asleep, because of course he did, and I just lay there, frozen, wide awake, staring at the wall beside me. And then the knocking starts, right by my head, on the wall I was leaning against. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. Then again. Knock, knock, knock. Every few minutes. Like someone in the guest bathroom on the other side of the wall was rapping their knuckles against it just to remind me they could. I didn't move. I didn't breathe right. I just waited for morning like it was a rescue helicopter. The next day, Evan's dad gets home. The second he walks in, I'm like, "We need to step outside for a minute." I didn't even care how weird I sounded. We go out onto the front porch, and I just look at him and go, "What is in your house?" He kind of squints at me. "What do you mean?" And I go, "The thing in your house. It's not friendly." And he nods, like I'd asked him where the extra towels were. He goes, "Oh, yeah. The guy who owned it before me, he took his own life in the house. Shot himself. He didn't like anybody being here. Didn't want me here when I first bought the place either. He's calmed down some over time." I swear my stomach dropped right through the porch, because suddenly everything, the dog, the peeking figure, the heavy waves, the knocking, clicked into place in the worst way. I've had strange moments before, little things you can shrug off, a weird feeling, a cold spot, a dream that feels too real. But that weekend, that was the darkest, most hostile energy I've ever felt in my life. Like being tolerated by something that hated you for breathing in its space. And I'll tell you this, I have never been so relieved to leave a house. I hope I never, ever feel that presence again. Okay, so I'm going to try to tell this in a way that makes sense, and I really appreciate you sticking with me if I ramble a little. I'm 19 now. I'm non-binary, and I've had this thing around me basically my whole life. And before anything else, because I know how people can get, I've talked to therapists, I've done screenings, I've had the "are you hallucinating" conversations. I'm not diagnosed with schizophrenia or anything like that. I've tried so hard to explain all of this away as anxiety, or stress, or misremembering, or coincidence. But it's been years, and it doesn't feel like coincidence anymore. Since I was little, it's been the same pattern, that heavy feeling of being watched when I'm alone. Shadowy shapes out of the corner of my eye, hearing my name, in the exact voice of someone I know. And then I'll ask them later, and they'll swear they never said anything. And then there's the physical stuff, which is the part that makes my stomach drop. Random bruises, tiny scratches, sometimes deeper ones, showing up like they've been there the whole time, except I'll watch them appear or realize they weren't there a minute ago. When I was a kid, I didn't even call it paranormal. I just accepted it. Like, oh, that's just how things are. I remember I had this little wax figure I made, kind of like a stand-in for me. I kept it on my shelf, way in the back, not near the edge or anything. It fell once, and I was able to fix it. Then it fell again later, and that time it shattered so badly I couldn't repair it. I tried to laugh it off, but even then it felt like a message. Around middle school, I started realizing I might be sensitive, I guess. But at that age, I didn't have the words, so my brain grabbed the closest thing it could. I was obsessed with creepy internet stories, like deeply obsessed. And I convinced myself that some of it was real. There was this whole phase where I genuinely thought Slender Man was after me, which I know sounds ridiculous now, but I was a kid, and I was scared, and it felt like it fit. And sure, some of it probably was my imagination, but not all of it. There's one night I still can't explain, and I swear I remember it like it's burned into my bones. I read one of those stupid chain stories that says if you read it, some killer shows up that night. And I panicked so hard I didn't even go to bed. I locked myself in the bathroom with this tiny kitchen knife, like that was going to do anything. And I stayed there. I didn't sleep. I didn't nod off. I was wide awake. And around midnight, I heard footsteps. Not house creaks, not pipes. Actual footsteps, coming up the stairs. Slow, steady, like someone who wasn't rushing. Then the handle on the bathroom door jiggled, and whoever it was, knocked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just sat there holding my breath, frozen so hard my hands hurt. And then, this is the part that makes my throat tighten even now. The footsteps didn't go away. They paced, back and forth, like the person was waiting, like they knew I was there. That lasted until around 3 in the morning, and then the footsteps went back down the stairs and stopped. The next day, nothing. No missing stuff, no broken locks, no smashed window. Nothing I could point to and say, see, this happened. But I know what I heard. I know I was awake. And it wasn't that creepypasta character. It was just something real that I don't have a clean explanation for. Then it was my turn to tell the story. And it worked. Like, immediately. Mira's cousin was the one with their head in my lap, and when we sat them up later, there were these big red scratch marks across their back. Not bleeding, thank God. More like irritated welts, like when you drag your nails across skin. But nobody had touched them, and it wasn't subtle. Everybody saw it. We tried it again with different people, and it happened again. It was like it only had power when I was the one leading it. When other people tried it on me, it kind of worked, but weaker. And the weirdest part was the animals. Her dog and even their old cat were acting wild, like they could feel something in the room with us. That's the kind of thing that sticks with you, you know? even if you want to forget it. The most consistent thing, though, the thing I can't escape, is the voices. I've heard my name called for as long as I can remember. Sometimes it's like it's coming from another room, sometimes right behind me, and I'll turn around and nobody's there. Or I'll ask, "Did you just call me?" And they'll look at me like I'm speaking another language. The scratches haven't been as bad lately, but I still don't trust my own skin. There were a few that left scars that make no sense. One time I looked at my forearm, looked away, then looked back, and there was a thin, pale scar like it had been healed for weeks. It wasn't there seconds before. That kind of thing messes with your head because you can't even argue with it. You can't, "Oh, maybe I bumped into something." How do you bump into something and instantly have an old scar? Then, during the pandemic, when I still lived with my parents, there was this moment that was different. I was in the kitchen washing dishes, totally normal, and I got this sudden urge to look behind me. Not like, I think someone's there, more like my body moved before my brain caught up, and there was someone standing there. I can't even describe them properly because my brain did this weird thing where it refused to hold on to the details, like it blurred. But it was a person shape, a presence, close enough that my heart should have exploded. I stared for a second, then turned back to the sink like I was on autopilot. And then the thought hit me like a slap. What the hell was that? And I whipped around again. Nothing. And I was home alone. That was the first time I felt like I actually saw it, not just sensed it. And what scares me is, it didn't feel angry. It didn't feel like it wanted to hurt me. It was just there, watching, like it always does. But this past year, things shifted. My luck has always been kind of awful, but it's been like the volume got turned up. I got kicked out of my old place in late November, and I barely managed to move in with my roommates. My roommates are also pagan. One of them, Rowan, practices a lot more than I do, and their partner Jules is really tuned in too. I'm the laziest witch in the house, honestly. I believe, but I'm not consistent. And now I'm wondering if that matters. Because on top of the housing chaos, Rowan's health has been getting worse. Doctors think they might be having seizures. It's been scary and exhausting and just one more weight. And then the pets. We lost so many this year it sounds unreal when I say it out loud. Rats, birds, a kitten. Some of it made sense. Old age, known issues. But some of it didn't. One of the birds was fine, like actually fine. Then one morning we found it on the floor, dead, no visible injuries. And the cage door was open, the water dish was empty, and food was dumped everywhere. Except I know I had refilled everything the day before. That morning, around 9:52, Rowan woke up late and was panicking. Jules woke up too, helped them get up, and Rowan sprinted out the door because they were already about to miss work. Like, no pause, no slow morning routine, just up and gone. A few minutes after that, maybe 5, not long, they started smelling something burning. They went looking and found the space heater on, cranked to full heat, hot enough they couldn't touch it. And we do not turn that heater on, ever. We keep stuff near it, and everyone in the house knows it stays off. The dial wasn't bumped slightly. It was twisted all the way to the end, like someone intentionally turned it. They checked the thermostat in the room. Nothing changed there. Then they checked the hallway controls, and that one was also set to full heat. And it couldn't have been the cats. Our cats are lazy little gremlins, but they don't mess with that stuff. And even if they did, the knob being perfectly maxed out makes no sense. It would have landed somewhere in the middle. The timing freaked us out because for the heater to be that hot, it had to have been turned on basically right when Jules woke up. Like, right as they were getting up and moving around. Which means, if nobody did it, then what did? We had this awful thought. What if whatever follows me isn't just messing with me anymore? What if it's trying to escalate? What if it wanted to scare us, or worse, start something that could have actually hurt us? And here's another detail that makes it worse. The day before, Rowan had this moment where all the hair on their body stood up, and they got full-body goosebumps out of nowhere. They said it only happened once before in their life, and the last time, it was right before they had an experience with something that did hurt them. And on top of that, their altar, dedicated to a sea deity, I think they said Pontus, has been feeling agitated, like the energy around it is unsettled and sharp. So now I'm sitting here like, okay, I've wanted answers for years, but I could afford to live in denial. It was creepy, but manageable. Now it feels like I don't have that luxury. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's attached to me, if it's attracted to me, if it's something I accidentally invited in when I was younger and scared and messing with things I didn't understand. I don't know if it's a spirit or just some pattern of energy that keeps following me like a shadow with a mind. I just know this. It's been with me a long time. And lately, it feels closer. And I'm trying really hard not to panic, but I also feel like I need to figure out what I'm dealing with before it gets worse. So, I've got two stories for you. They happened in the same general area, and I still get that tight, prickly feeling in my chest when I replay them. I live out in a valley in western Utah, not far from the Nevada line. There's a mountain right near us, and it's the kind of place where wildlife doesn't stay politely up in the hills. Deer wander down like they own the roads, and you'll hear about mountain lions every so often. People spotting them, losing chickens, finding tracks, that kind of place. Anyway, first story. I'm in the car with my best friend Riley, just driving through our neighborhood in the middle of the day. Bright daylight, no weird shadows, nothing like that. And we see this dog on the side of the road near a tree. Not a stray-looking dog either, just ancient. Like, how is he even out here old? Gray muzzle, droopy eyes, ears hanging low, moving like every step is a negotiation with his joints. I tell Riley to pull over because I'm thinking, this dog is going to get hit. He can barely move and he's right by the street. I get out and I start walking toward him. Soft voice, hands low, trying to look harmless. The dog tucks his tail and gives me this low, warning woof. Not feral, not panicked, almost annoyed, like I'm interrupting something. Then he turns away from me and starts hobbling toward the road. That freaks me out even more. I rush back to the car to grab something, anything, like a cracker, a piece of granola, whatever we have, just to coax him close enough to check a tag. I hop back in and I'm like, Riley, just creep forward, don't lose him. And listen, my eyes never leave that dog, not even once. We roll forward maybe 10 feet. The dog turns toward this house and slips between two parked cars out front. I immediately tell Riley to stop because I'm picturing him stepping into the road and us clipping him. I jump out and go straight to the spot, and he's just gone. Like, gone. There's no dog under the cars, no dog behind the cars, no dog in the yard, no dog limping away down the sidewalk. The street is empty. And this wasn't a quick, healthy dog that could bolt. This was a fragile, old animal that was moving at a snail's pace. There's no way he could have disappeared without us seeing where he went. Riley and I search for a solid 10 minutes. We're calling out, shaking a bag of snacks, scanning under bushes, checking behind fences. Nothing. No collar jingle, no paw steps, no barking, no owner coming out like, "Oh, that's my dog." It happened in broad daylight, and there wasn't anyone outside with us. Just this normal, quiet street, and a dog that blinked out of existence. Okay, second story. A different night, same general area. I'm walking with Riley again, later than we should have been out, honestly. The air's cold, and the neighborhood feels extra still, like you can hear the space between sounds. We're heading toward her house, and the quickest way takes us along a few streets that angle toward the mountain. We hear a dog barking. Not close, like a few streets up, but clear enough to raise the hair on your arms. It's coming from the direction of the mountain, kind of echoing between houses. We keep walking because we have to pass that way anyway. And we're doing the usual nice voice thing, even though the dog isn't right in front of us yet. Like, "Hey buddy, it's okay," and "Go home," because sometimes that actually helps. Then we see it. A dog shape near a parked car up ahead, just enough movement to catch our attention. And as we approach, it slips behind the car. And I swear to you, within the same second, a man steps out from behind that exact same car. Not a dog, a man. And the dog is just not there anymore. He just walks away. Calm. Steady. Like we're not even real. Riley and I were so freaked out we didn't talk. Like, genuinely didn't talk for a stretch. We just walked. Faster. And I could feel my heart in my throat. It was that kind of fear where speaking feels like you might break something open. Later, when we finally did talk, we did that careful thing where you're trying not to lead the other person. Like, "Okay, tell me what you saw." And she described the exact same thing I saw. And here's the part that still gets me. Riley is a skeptic. She doesn't do paranormal. She's not the type to hype herself up or turn weird moments into spooky stories. If anything, she usually talks me down. But she couldn't explain it. And she didn't try to laugh it off. So, yeah, people say creatures like that could be anywhere. Maybe they can. I don't know. I just know where I live, Utah, right by the mountain, all that wildlife, and I know what I saw. Twice, with the same witness, the same timing, the same impossible, clean disappearance. And that's what makes me wonder, how often do we brush past something like that and never even realize it? Merry Christmas to all our wonderful Paranormal M channel viewers. We're wishing you a joyful holiday season and a fantastic new year, surrounded by the people you love. Think of today's mysterious stories as a little gift from us. So let's enjoy this special time together. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our newest videos. Now, let's dive in. So, this goes back to the early 80s. Let's say around 1984. I'd signed up as a volunteer at St. Bridget's Hospital up in Evanston, just outside Chicago. And I wasn't doing it for any heroic reason, you know? It was personal. I'd always felt tethered to that place. I was born there for one thing. And when I was little, maybe 4 or 5, I got so sick with pneumonia that my parents thought they were going to lose me. That hospital didn't just treat me. It saved me. So volunteering felt like the closest thing I could offer as a thank you, even if it was decades late. Of course, volunteers don't get a paycheck, but there were these small, oddly sweet perks, like they'd feed us on the evenings we worked. Not gourmet, but warm food, a tray, a little moment to sit down. And honestly, the best payment was the people. There was one woman in particular, Marlene, who ran the front desk like she owned the building. Late 40s, maybe early 50s, sharp lipstick, sharper tongue, and a laugh that could fill the whole lobby. She told stories the way some people breathe. Her kids, her grandkids, her first job, her disastrous blind dates. And every once in a while she'd drop something wild, like her time at a strict girls' boarding school in the 50s, the kind people politely called corrective. She made it sound like a sitcom with occasional trauma. Anyway, after a few weeks volunteering, I started hearing these little rumors about the hospital itself. It had originally opened way back at the turn of the century, 1901, in this big old Victorian house. Later, sometime in the 1920s, they added an annex, and after that it just kept expanding until it turned into the modern suburban medical center everyone knew. Some people swore parts of the original structures still existed inside the maze. Sealed off corners, old staircases, maybe even leftover hallways. Other people rolled their eyes and said, "No, they remodeled everything. It's all gone." I didn't know who to believe. But I'll tell you this. One night, I found out the hard way that something was still there. My volunteer shift was always the same. I'd get there around 5 p.m., do little tasks, deliver flowers, help Marlene with visitor passes, point lost families toward elevators. Then dinner around 7:30, then filing or errands until about 10, and I'd head home feeling useful and a little tired. That particular night, around 9:15, Marlene handed me a patient chart in one of those thick paper folders. This was before everything went digital, and she said, "Take this up to the nursing supervisor on the upper floors." I asked where exactly, and she gave me directions the way people give directions when they assume you magically know the building. "Go up, take the hall, turn, then you'll see it." I'd never been to that section before, so I head off, trying to act confident, and within minutes I'm not confident at all. Corridors start looking identical. Signs point to units I don't recognize. One hallway dead ends into a quiet set of doors that feel like staff only, so I backtrack. Another corridor bends and bends and bends like it's deliberately trying to mess with me. After a few minutes of wandering, my stomach starts doing that anxious dip like, great. I'm lost in a hospital with someone's paperwork, and I'm about to be that volunteer. So I decide I'm going to reset, start over, find something familiar, and I hurry through a random door, thinking it'll take me back toward the main flow of the building. And the second I step through, it's like I walked into a different decade, and there was this stillness. Not quiet in a normal way, more like the air itself wasn't expecting anyone to be there. On the left, I could see a staircase going down with an ornate iron handrail, decorative, almost elegant, and there was an old water fountain set into the wall like a little shrine, the kind with a rounded basin and a metal spout that looked like it belonged in a museum. What really got me, though, was what wasn't there. No bright safety signage, no exit arrows, no direction boards, no big modern warnings. Nothing. Just that soft, tired light and a corridor that felt preserved. I remember thinking, actually whispering it to myself like an idiot, so it does exist. And then, because I suddenly remembered I was carrying a chart like a responsible person, I snapped out of it and told myself, "Okay, cool, spooky hallway, love that for you. Now go deliver the folder before someone calls the front desk and Marlene roasts you alive." So I start walking toward the door at the far end of the corridor, the one with a thin slice of light leaking around it. And halfway down, right around where that old fountain was, I stopped. Not because I chose to, because I couldn't go any farther. It was the strangest feeling. There was nothing in front of me. No rope, no gate, no cart, no locked door. But when I tried to step forward, it was like my body met resistance, like pushing into a sheet of thick glass, invisible, firm, and completely unmoving. I actually lifted my hands and patted the air like I was trying to find the edge of something. Nothing to see, plenty to feel. My first thought was, am I having a panic attack? My second thought was, is there some kind of plastic barrier I can't see? And then, this is where it gets weird. My brain jumped to a memory from high school. I had this friend back then who loved sci-fi as much as I did. We'd talked about time travel theories, books, movies, all of it. I specifically remembered a conversation about a novel, something like Time and Again, and my friend saying, if you really went back, you wouldn't be able to interact. You'd be blocked from changing anything. You'd just watch. Like a movie you're inside but can't touch. Standing there in that dim corridor, palms pressing into nothing. That memory came back so vividly it made my skin prickle. And I thought, very calmly for someone who absolutely was not calm, what if I didn't just find an old hallway? What if I found an old hallway in its own time? I started imagining, without seeing them, doctors in white coats moving past me, nurses with starched uniforms, footsteps and murmured voices happening just beyond my reach, patients who would now be long gone, people living ordinary moments in a year that wasn't mine. And then the fear arrived, full-bodied, because I realized something. If this was some kind of slip, some kind of pocket, some kind of wrong doorway, then maybe the only way out was through. So I leaned into the invisible barrier, hard. Not a shove, not a tap. I mean, I put my shoulder into it like I was trying to push open a stuck door. The light at the far end of the hallway became my target, the way you pick a point when you're trying not to panic. For a while, nothing happened. It didn't budge. My feet slid a little on the linoleum. My breath sounded too loud. My heart was hammering like it wanted out of my ribs. And then, slowly, like something giving way after years of being sealed, the resistance softened. It didn't break so much as it relented. And suddenly, I stumbled forward, almost tripping, and the hallway was just a hallway again. I sprinted the rest of the way, yanked open the door at the end, fluorescent lights, modern signage, nurses moving around with that quick, efficient energy, a phone ringing, a cart squeaking, reality, loud and practical. I stood there for a second, trying to get my face to look normal, and finally I walked up to a nurse and asked, probably too stiffly, "Hi, could you tell me where I am?" She looked at the folder in my hands and said something like, "You're right where you need to be. Who's the chart for?" I handed it over, hands shaking, I'm not even exaggerating, and she took it like I'd just given her any old paperwork. Then I asked how to get back to the lobby without, and I swear this is what I almost said, without going through any weird doors. What I did say was, "What's the simplest way back? I'm trying not to get turned around." A few ramps, a couple normal corridors, an elevator ride, and I finally made it back to the front desk. Marlene was waiting with that expression people get when they're worried, but they've decided to convert it into anger. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "They've been calling down here asking about that file. You know what time it is? You're past your shift." I opened my mouth, and for a split second, I wanted to tell her everything. The hallway, the fountain, the invisible wall, the sensation of pressing into time itself. But I could already hear her reaction in my head. "Oh, honey, sure. And then you rode a dinosaur to the gift shop." So I told her the closest believable version. "I took a wrong door," I said. "Ended up in this old back hallway. Looked like it was from the 20s. Weird lighting, old linoleum. It was like stepping into a museum. And the door was kind of stuck." Marlene narrowed her eyes. "There aren't any back hallways where I sent you." Then she smirked, this knowing, theatrical smirk, and said, "You were chatting up an intern, weren't you?" "What? No." "Oh, please," she said, waving me off. "They're cute and they know it. Some of them are total heartbreakers. I'm just saying, be careful." "I wasn't flirting," I insisted. "I got lost." She pointed her pen at me like a judge. "Next time you're here, we're going up there together. I want to see this magical old hallway you found. Because I'm telling you, honey, after that remodel years ago, that part of the building got completely reworked. The place you're describing doesn't exist. And here's the thing. We went back. Not the next day, but not long after. She got someone to watch the desk and marched me upstairs like we were on a field trip. We walked the route I thought I'd taken, and when we got to where that door should have been, there was no door. Not a locked door, not a remodeled doorway, nothing that even suggested a door had ever been there. Just wall. Marlene looked at me with raised eyebrows like, Aha. And honestly, I felt cold all over because I knew what I'd seen. I knew what I'd touched, or what I couldn't touch. For the next couple of years, whenever I volunteered, I kept an eye out. I'd take slightly different routes. I'd peek down side corridors. I'd watch doors the way you watch a cat you don't trust. I never found it again. Eventually, I stopped volunteering, not because of the hallway, but because my job changed and the commute stopped making sense. Life moved on the way it does. I heard later the hospital became part of a larger network, like so many did. Still respected, still busy, still saving people the way it saved me. But sometimes I think about that corridor, about the checkered floor and the old fountain and that invisible boundary. And I wonder if, buried deep in the bones of that building, there's still a seam, a thin place, a doorway that only opens when it feels like it. Hey, so I heard this story online a while back, and it's one of those that just sticks to you. I've been thinking about it again lately, and I wanted to tell you the way it was told to me, like we're just sitting here, and I'm trying to get it all out without losing the feeling of it. So this took place in Thailand, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, something like that. There was this tutor, a woman everyone called Teacher Nuon. She was the kind of teacher who didn't just teach, you know? She poured herself into her students. Like a lot of tutors there, she ran extra classes after school and on weekends. She even converted the downstairs of her house into little classrooms. Whiteboards, plastic chairs, stacks of worksheets, the whole thing. As her tutoring got more popular, she started getting overloaded, so she brought in a close friend to help, Teacher Molly. Nuon handled the middle school kids, and Molly handled the older ones, juniors and seniors prepping for those brutal exams. And their schedule was intense. Some weekends the older students would actually sleep over, Friday night through Sunday, because it was easier than commuting back and forth, and because the grind never really stopped. Anyway, one summer break, they were running lessons like normal. But Nuon noticed something a little odd. Molly's class was way smaller than usual. Only 4 students showed up that day. Molly didn't seem bothered. There'd been a lot of school activities that week. Field trips, workshops, random programs. So it made sense some kids would miss tutoring. Everything felt normal until Nuon's phone buzzed. A message from a friend who worked at another school. "Did you hear a school bus from your area crashed?" Nuon's stomach dropped. She called her friend right away, and her friend said the bus number belonged to the same grade and even the same class section as the students currently in Molly's room. And that's the moment where Nuon's brain did that horrible thing where it tries to solve the impossible question. If that bus crashed, then who is Molly teaching right now? Nuon went downstairs and asked the housekeeper, an older woman everyone respectfully called Auntie, how the kids arrived. Auntie just shrugged and said, "When I came down, they were already here." The front door wasn't usually locked during class hours. Students came in on their own all the time. Then, ding, another message. This time it was a photo of the wrecked bus, and it was clearly the one marked for that exact class. So now Nuon is standing there holding her phone like it's suddenly a weapon, thinking, who is in that room? She tried to keep it together. Her middle school class ended first, so she let them out early, and by around evening, their parents came and picked them up. But Molly's class, those 4 older students were supposed to sleep over. And Nuon couldn't imagine lying in bed knowing there were 4 students downstairs who might not even be alive. So she texted Molly, "Hey, can you stay upstairs with me tonight? I feel uneasy." Molly read it. No reply. Nuon couldn't stand it anymore, so she quietly walked down the hall and peeked into Molly's classroom. From the angle she had, she could see Molly's back at the whiteboard, teaching like everything was fine. But the 4 students, they slowly turned their heads and looked straight at Nuon. Not curious, not confused, just staring, like they already knew something she didn't. Nuon ducked away so fast she nearly fell, heart hammering. A minute later, Molly finally texted back, and Nuon, panicking, just lied. "Oh, nothing. I just wanted to talk." That night, Nuon asked Auntie to keep an eye on the kids, see if anything strange happened. Nuon still hadn't told anyone about the bus crash, not even Auntie. Around 8 p.m., Auntie came upstairs and said, "They didn't touch their dinner. Not one bite." Nuon swallowed hard and told Auntie, "Check again later. See if they sleep." And honestly, you can almost feel how unfair that was. Poor Auntie, just trying to do her job while the air in that house is turning heavy. Later that night, Nuon tried calling her friend again. Voicemail. No answer. By around 11 p.m., Nuon texted again, asking for a list of victims. Then she decided she couldn't stay in her room anymore. She had to know. She went downstairs. The lights were off, and in the darkness, she could make out 4 silhouettes sitting in a tight circle on the floor, still, unmoving, like they'd been frozen in place. She backed away, until she bumped into Auntie in the hallway. Nuon, trembling, showed Auntie the photo of the crash. Auntie's face changed immediately, and she whispered, "No wonder. They've been acting strange all night. They haven't eaten. They've been sitting like that since around 9. They hurried back upstairs to Nuon's room. Nuon texted Molly again, "Are you awake?" No response. And then, someone knocked. Nuon thought, finally, Molly. She opened the door. It wasn't Molly. It was the 4 students. They rushed inside so fast Nuon barely had time to breathe. One of them covered her mouth, not rough, but urgent, and whispered, "Please, don't scream." Then one of the students held up a sheet of paper. Written on it, "Don't make any noise. Teacher Molly is dead." Nuon's head spun. "What?" she mouthed. And then she did the only thing she could do. She started crying and shaking her head, whispering, "No, no, it's you. It's you 4. I saw the bus." She showed them the photo, and the students stared at it, and then shook their heads. Yes, it was their bus number, they said, but that bus had been used earlier in the week. The sticker must have been left on by mistake. The bus that crashed wasn't carrying students. It was carrying teachers heading to a workshop. And earlier that evening, the students had gotten an official SMS from school, a condolence message listing the victims. They showed Nuon the names, and there it was. Teacher Molly. So Nuon's friend had misunderstood, thought it was a student bus, but it wasn't, which meant the 4 students were alive. And the question changed into something even worse. Then who is in the room next door, teaching like nothing happened? At that point, Nuon's room was packed. Nuon, Auntie, and the 4 students. 6 people breathing the same scared air. Nuon's unread message to Molly was still sitting there on her phone. And then, knock knock. A voice outside, calm and familiar. "Teacher Nuon, are you in your room? I just saw your text." It was Molly's voice. Nuon's blood ran cold. She forced herself to answer, trying to sound normal. "Sorry, I'm already in bed." And Molly, like it was any ordinary night, just said, "Oh, okay," and walked away. The students were shaking. Nuon whispered, "Are you sure? Are you sure she died?" One of the students nodded and whispered back, "We saw her teaching like normal, but she didn't have legs. They said it looked like her body was floating, like the lower half wasn't there the way it should be. And when Nuon peeked in earlier, they'd stared at her because they thought she also knew. They'd gotten the SMS during class, and suddenly everything about Molly didn't make sense. That's why they hadn't eaten. That's why they'd huddled together afterward. They were trying to survive what their eyes were telling them. Then they heard Molly's voice again in the hallway. "Teacher Nuon, are the kids in your room?" And then, softer, "Kids? Auntie? Where is everyone?" Nuon glanced at the clock. Around 1 a.m. Nuon swallowed and answered, I think their parents came to get them." Molly paused. "But their shoes are still outside." And that detail, God, because it means she cared enough to check, even like that. Auntie took a deep breath and said, "I'll go talk to her." Auntie had known Molly for years. She couldn't accept it. She kept saying, "Teacher Molly wouldn't scare me." So Auntie went downstairs. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 20. And then Molly's voice floated up the stairs again, almost cheerful. "Teacher Nuon, come check on Auntie. She fainted. Should we take her to the hospital?" The students looked at Nuon like, "Please don't go." But someone has to. So Nuon walked down, bracing herself. She didn't see Molly at first. She saw Auntie lying on the floor. Nuon rushed to her, shaking her gently, greeting her name. Auntie stirred, eyes wide, and clutched Nuon's arm. And Auntie gasped, "How could I not faint? Her body, Teacher Molly's body, it's twisted, broken, wrong." Then Auntie pointed shakily toward the stairs. Nuon looked. And there she was, Molly, descending the stairs. Except her legs, both of them, were mangled. Bent in directions legs should never bend. One leg dragged like it wasn't properly attached, tapping the steps as she moved. Thud, thud, thud. And Molly smiled, like everything was normal. "Oh, Auntie is awake now. That's good," she said, warm as ever. Nuon forced herself to speak. "Yeah, I'm going to take Auntie back to bed. You should sleep too. You must be tired." Molly paused, then quietly turned and went back up the stairs. Nuon helped Auntie up, step by step, every nerve screaming. When Nuon reached her own door again, she saw Molly standing near it, looking puzzled, almost like a child. "I don't know why, but I can't open my door," Molly said softly. "Can you open it for me? I'm so sleepy." And Nuon, this is the part that always gets me. She wasn't even just terrified anymore. She felt pity. Like Molly truly didn't understand. So Nuon opened the door to Molly's room and let her in, and gently closed it behind her. Nuon went back to her room, and the students begged to know what happened, but Nuon whispered, "In the morning, I promise." Eventually, the kids fell asleep, pure exhaustion, bodies shutting down from fear. And finally, the night ended. At around 6 a.m., Nuon's friend came to the house, and with her were Molly's parents. Because in many Thai beliefs, when someone dies suddenly, especially violently, the spirit may not realize right away, and family members come quickly to call them home, to guide them. They went straight to Molly's room. It was empty. She wasn't there anymore. And Molly's name was among them. And I just remember the storyteller ending with something simple, something human, like, she was a teacher who worked so hard, right to the very end. And wherever she went after that night, they hoped she finally understood, and they hoped she went peacefully. So, let me tell you a story I still can't shake. Years ago, I was walking through Edinburgh on a gray, wind-brushed afternoon, the kind where the city feels like it's holding its breath. And out beyond the old streets, there's that hulking rise of rock everyone knows, Arthur's Seat. It's an ancient hill, an old volcano, watching the city like it's been keeping secrets since before anyone started writing them down. And one of those secrets, maybe the strangest, was found tucked into the stone itself. Back in 1837, not long ago in the grand scheme, but long enough for details to blur, a few local boys were scrambling around the crags and heather on the slope. Kids being kids, laughing, shoving, daring each other to climb higher. One of them, let's call him Callum, noticed a thin crack in the rock, half hidden under moss and dirt, like the hill had split its lips just a little. They dug at it with sticks and bare hands at first, then stones, and finally, fingers hooked into the cold earth. And that's when they pulled out the first one. A tiny wooden coffin, small enough to fit in a palm. At first they thought it was a toy, something dropped by another child maybe. But it wasn't just one. They kept pulling them out, one after another. 17 in total, all neatly stacked in that narrow crevice, like someone had packed them away with care. Each coffin was only a few inches long, maybe the length of a pocket knife. Simple wood, roughly nailed together, but not sloppy, not random, intentional. And then they opened one. Inside wasn't jewelry, not coins, not letters. Inside was a little figure, a hand-carved doll, stiff and pale with time, dressed in plain cloth clothing that looked like it had been cut from worn fabric, like scraps from a life that had already been used up. That's the part that makes your stomach drop, isn't it? Because suddenly it isn't a weird box. Suddenly it's a burial. And there were no names, no dates, no markings at all. Just 17 tiny coffins, each with its own silent occupant, hidden away on a lonely hillside far from any churchyard. So naturally, the city started talking. Some people said it had to be an old ritual, a folk practice, something left behind from the days when the hills were considered living places, full of spirits, warnings, protections. People whispered about binding bad luck into objects, burying symbols to keep something awful away, like sealing a curse in wood and cloth and pushing it into the earth where it couldn't follow you home. Others thought it was grief, private grief, the kind that doesn't get a headstone. Maybe someone lost children, maybe stillborn babies or infants taken by disease and couldn't afford a proper burial, or couldn't bear the shame that sometimes clung to loss back then. Maybe these tiny coffins were a way of saying, "You mattered. I'm sorry. I remember." But then there was the theory that made even the bravest folks lower their voices. Because Edinburgh has a dark chapter, one it tries not to show visitors too brightly. In the early 1800s, bodies were valuable. Medical schools needed them. And in that hunger, men like Knox and Mullen, that's what people started calling them in the gossip, became monsters in plain clothes, murdering people, selling them for dissection, letting the victims vanish without prayer or burial, or even a name spoken aloud. And here's the chilling part. The number didn't feel like an accident. 17, a tidy count, like a ledger, like someone was trying to correct something that had gone unforgiven. And when you hear that, you can almost picture it, can't you? Someone working late by candlelight, hands shaking, whittling rough little faces out of wood, stitching tiny shirts and trousers from scraps, building coffins out of cheap pine because pine is what you use when you don't have money, or when you don't think you deserve anything finer. Not art, not craft, atonement. Over time, the coffins ended up in safer hands. They were moved into the care of the museum, the place where oddities go when people can't decide whether they're sacred or cursed. Preserved behind glass, labeled in tidy sentences that tell you the facts. Wood, fabric, found on Arthur's seat, maker unknown. But the label doesn't tell you what it feels like to stand in front of them. Because even now, with clean lighting and careful displays, they don't look like curiosities. They look like somebody's secret, somebody's confession, folded up and buried where no one would ever have to answer for it. And that's what keeps the story alive, because no theory fits perfectly. A ritual? Maybe. A memorial? Could be. A message to the dead, or a warning to the living. Honestly, I wouldn't rule it out. What I do know is this: Edinburgh is a city that wears beauty like a coat, but underneath, it keeps its old fears, its old beliefs, its old shadows. And Arthur's seat, quiet, ancient, patient, just sits there above it all, as if to say, I've held worse secrets than this. So if you ever find yourself in Edinburgh, and you're standing at the foot of that hill, don't rush past it like it's just a hike. Pause for a second. Look up at the rock and the grass and the dark folds of the land, and imagine a pair of hands hiding something precious in a crack in the earth. Imagine someone walking away without looking back. And ask yourself, softly, the way you would in a church, who were those 17 meant to be? And what was someone trying so desperately to put to rest? Hey, so I don't know how many of you were actually online in the late 90s, but the internet back then was a completely different animal. No social media, no feeds, no algorithm trying to guess your next thought before you even have it. It was mostly static pages, clunky message boards, weird little fan sites, and those strange flash animations people made just because they could. And honestly, that freedom came with this haze of mystery. Half-buried links, broken directories, stuff you'd stumble onto and immediately feel like you weren't supposed to be there. Stories spread quietly too, like rumors whispered in the back of a classroom, except the classroom was a forum thread at 2 a.m. And if you were around then, you might have heard the one about the Red Room. Not the movie thing, not some haunted live stream. I mean the rumor that bounced around between kids who spent way too much time online. This idea that there was a website, and once you landed on it, a pop-up would appear and ask one simple question. Do you like the Red Room? And that pop-up, you couldn't close it. You couldn't escape it. You could click the X, you could hit Alt F4, you could refresh until your fingers cramped. Didn't matter. It just kept coming back. The version I remember people describing wasn't even fancy, just a harsh red window. Sometimes with jackknife text, sometimes with symbols that looked like they should mean something. And the rumor went that it could show up on random corners of the web, old personal pages, hobby sites, places nobody visited unless they got lost. And the part that really made it stick was what people claimed happened next. Supposedly, if you saw it, you'd be found in a red room the next day. Nobody ever explained what that meant exactly. They didn't need to. Your brain filled in the blanks for you, and whatever you imagined was always worse than anything someone could have written out. For years, I treated it like what it probably was, a classic online urban legend. The kind of thing that thrives in late-night chat rooms and message boards because it's scarier when nobody can prove it's real. But recently, I found myself thinking about it again. Let me back up. The first time the Red Room rumor felt even remotely real to people wasn't because of a website. it was because of an animation. A flash piece made by someone going by the name Kuroda Nori, or something like that. Handles were always slippery back then. In the animation, there's this kid who hears the same rumor. He laughs it off. Then one night, while he's online, the pop-up appears. He tries closing it over and over, but instead of disappearing, the message changes. It gets longer. It gets more specific. It starts vague, like, "Do you like it?" Then it becomes, "Do you like the red room?" And then, the kid sees a list. Names. Like a roll call. And the implication is pretty clear. Those are the people who saw it before him. And right when you think the animation ends, it hits you with the nastiest trick. Your screen flashes a fake system error window that looks just real enough to make your stomach drop. Like the animation reached through the glass and touched your computer. It's hard to explain to people who grew up with polished apps and constant pop-ups. Back then, a flash animation that pretended your computer was breaking felt personal, like it knew where you were sitting. Now, here's where it stops being just folklore and turns into something heavier. In the early 2000s, there was a horrible incident in Japan. Different city than the one everyone always cites, but the same general story. A violent act involving kids, and afterward, the media dug through internet history and reported that one of them had bookmarked that Red Room animation. Because people love a simple explanation for something they can't emotionally process. They want a culprit, a cause, something they can point at and say, "That's why." Was the animation responsible? No, almost certainly not. But the association was enough to turn the Red Room from a niche creepypasta into a national obsession for a while. First in Japan, and then echoed everywhere else through translation threads and horror forums. Years later, when another unsettling incident happened and people noticed similar online references, it surged again, like a half-dead thing twitching back to life. Again, no real proof, no direct line, but the timing made people uneasy, and the idea of a digital curse grew teeth. By the 2010s, most people wrote it off as a relic, a creepy flash short from the old internet, something you watch once, laugh about, and move on from. And then Flash died. Around 2020, it was basically over. No more easy playing old animations in a browser. You'd think that would have buried the whole story for good. Except, it didn't end. It shifted. People started describing weird little moments on modern devices. Nothing exactly like the original, but close enough to make your skin prickle. A screen flicker that turns crimson for a blink. A notification in Japanese that vanishes before you can react. A tiny window appearing in the corner and disappearing like it never happened. Too fast for a screenshot, too quick for proof. And sure, that could be anything. Glitches happen. Background apps misfire. Your brain is a pattern machine, and it's desperate to connect dots when you're already thinking about something creepy. But it still bothered me, because it felt like the story had learned how to survive. Like it didn't need Flash anymore. It just needed the idea. And before you ask, no, I'm not saying I saw some original cursed site. I'm not even saying I believe in supernatural code lurking in old animations. But 2 weeks ago, something happened that I can't quite file away. I was up late on my laptop, working on a document, lights off, room quiet. Just that dull glow from the screen. And for a split second, barely a heartbeat, I saw a small red window pop up in the lower corner. Not bright, not neon. More like a muted, dried blood crimson. It didn't even have time to load words. It just flickered and vanished. I told myself it was nothing. A browser hiccup. Some system notification that failed to render. Then it happened again the next night. Same corner, same color, same blink and it's gone timing. So I did what anyone would do when they're trying to prove to themselves they're not being ridiculous. I tried to recreate it. Opened a bunch of tabs, turned notifications on and off, switched networks, checked my extensions, ran scans, looked for malware. Nothing. Clean. And then, last night, it changed. No pop-up, no red window, just a reflection. I leaned closer to adjust my brightness, and the screen went slightly dark, just enough to catch my face in it. And for half a second, listen, I know how this sounds. I swear my reflection wasn't lit by the normal cool colors of my desktop. It was red. Not the room, not the actual screen, just the reflection. I blinked, and it snapped back to normal like nothing happened. And I sat there for a long time after that, not moving, just waiting for my brain to explain it away. But it didn't. I'm not saying it's the red room. I'm not saying there's something living in my laptop. I'm just saying I can't shake the feeling that some stories don't die. They adjust. They evolve. They slip into whatever shape our technology takes next. And sometimes it feels like the internet isn't only something we look into. Sometimes it feels like it looks back. Maybe you can tell me if it means anything. Do you like the red room? So, most people think an elevator is just a metal box. You step in, press a button, stare at the numbers, and a few seconds later, ding, you're where you meant to be. But there's this story from Japan that treats elevators like something else entirely, like a doorway, a ritual hidden inside something so normal you'd never think to be afraid of it. They call it the isekai elevator, and the idea is simple in the worst possible way. If you press the right sequence of floors, the doors won't open back into your world anymore. I first heard about it the way you hear about a lot of unsettling things. Late at night, half paying attention, scrolling through old threads. People said the earliest version showed up on 2channel, that chaotic Japanese message board where rumors breed like mold in the dark. At first it sounded like another chain post, the kind you read, get a chill, and forget by morning. But this one didn't fade out. It grew. Different users, different cities, and somehow the details stayed weirdly consistent. Same floor sequence, same timing, same figure that appears like she's tied to the ritual itself, not to any specific building. Some people said it was a prank. Some called it a test. A few, quietly, almost reluctantly, said it was dangerous. And then there were the comments that really made my stomach knot. The ones that were basically, my cousin tried it, my friend tried it, and they didn't come back. What makes it stick, I think, is how deeply Japanese it feels. Not in a touristy way, but in that old, uncomfortable way Japan has of treating the boundary between worlds like it's thin as paper. There are stories there about spirit realms sitting right beside ours. Not far away. Not up in the sky, just adjacent. Separated by the right bridge, the right tunnel, the right forest path at the wrong hour. So in older times, maybe you crossed over through a shrine gate or a red bridge. But the story goes, modern life replaced shrines with office buildings, and replaced sacred rituals with elevator buttons. And honestly, an elevator is the perfect place to hide a myth. You're not on one floor or the other. You're suspended between places, between destinations. That weird little pause where you're nowhere for a moment. That's where stories like this love to live. Here's how the ritual is supposed to work. You find a building with at least 10 floors. Not 9, not 8, 10 or more. You go in alone. And I mean alone. No other passengers, no friendly security guards stepping in last second, no one peeking around the corner. People swear it only works if it's just you and the hum of the cables. Then you press this exact sequence. 3, 1, 7, 1, 10, 4. the elevator moves. It's boring at first, normal. You start to feel ridiculous, and then it reaches the 4th floor. That's when the door opens, and someone gets in. A woman, or something that looks like one. In the versions I've read, her name is never given, but people describe her the same way. Long, dark hair, pale clothing like an off-white dress or hospital gown, face partly hidden like she doesn't want you to get a clean look. And the worst part? Her expression doesn't change. Not once. She doesn't greet you, doesn't glance at you like a normal person would. She just steps in like she belongs there more than you do. The rule everyone repeats, like it's the one thing keeping them safe, is don't speak to her. Don't ask her anything. Don't apologize, because the moment you do, you've confirmed yourself somehow. Like you've responded to something that isn't meant to be answered. After she enters, the elevator is supposed to start moving on its own, rising without you pressing anything else, up to the 10th floor. And when the doors open there, you're not where you should be. People can't quite agree on what the other side looks like, but the descriptions overlap in this eerie, familiar way. They talk about a sky that's wrong, washed out red or gray like dirty fog. They talk about buildings that feel unfinished, flat walls, no signs, no windows, like someone built a city as a replica and forgot to add the details that make it human. The streets are empty, not quiet, empty, like everything has been cleaned and bleached and sealed. And there's this silence people mention that hits me harder than anything else. Not peaceful silence. The kind that makes you feel like sound is being swallowed. Like the world itself is holding its breath. A lot of people say the first thing you notice is the feeling of being watched. Not from one direction, but from everywhere. Like the air has eyes. And if you step out, you can walk, technically. But everyone warns you. Don't go far, because some say it stretches forever, block after block, repeating like a copy-pasted maze. Others say it folds, like the streets curve back on themselves, like the place doesn't want you to find an edge. One person claimed they heard whispering behind them, but every time they turned, there was nothing. Another said they saw shadows in the corner of their vision that didn't match their own movements. And then there's a detail that shows up just often enough to make your skin tighten. Some people swear the woman from the 4th floor followed them out. Not quickly, not aggressively, just stepped out behind them like she was making sure they didn't forget she existed. Like she'd already decided where they belonged. There's also a real case people like to bring up. One of those stories that gets repeated because it has dates and a location, which makes it feel heavier. It was around 2014 in Yokohama. Someone named Masato, at least that's the name that gets used online, walked into a building and got on an elevator. Security footage shows him stepping in, tapping the buttons fast like he was nervous or in a hurry. And then the footage glitches, comes back, glitches again. People claim the display showed floors that didn't exist in that building. And then, this is the part that turns a normal disappearance into legend. There's a stretch of missing time in the recording. Not the camera angle was bad. Not it was blurry. Just missing. When the doors opened again, the elevator was empty. Search teams checked the building. Stairwells, maintenance access, roof doors, everything. No sign of him. No explanation. And the internet, of course, grabbed it like a match to gasoline. Some said it was coincidence. Others said, no, that's what it looks like when someone presses the wrong buttons. And even if you don't believe any of it, like even if you roll your eyes and tell yourself it's just a good creepypasta, it still clings to you. Because the fear underneath it is real. It's the fear of trusting a door you don't control. It's the fear of being in a small space where you can't steer anything. It's the fear that something familiar can turn unfamiliar in one quiet moment. Somewhere that doesn't have help, doesn't have people, doesn't have rules you understand. And the creepiest part? Elevators already feel a little like that. You step in, you surrender control, and you just assume the doors will open back into your world. Most of the time they do. But this story lingers because it whispers, not all of them have to. So is the ritual real? Depends who you ask. Skeptics say it's folklore wearing a modern coat. Believers say it's an ancient doorway, updated for the age of office towers. And the people who claim they tried it and came back, they usually don't talk about what they saw for very long. They'll just say something like, "Don't mess with it." And then they'll go quiet. Because whether it's true or not, the thought is hard to shake. Every elevator is a choice. And every button is a small act of trust. Most doors open where you expect, but not all of them. I've heard a lot of scary stories over the years, but there's one Japanese urban legend that's always gotten under my skin. Not because it's the most violent or the most supernatural, but because it sits right on the edge of plausible. Like something that could have started as one strange encounter and then spread like wildfire. It isn't about haunted temples or cursed videotapes. No ancient rites, no dusty scrolls. This one supposedly walked right through ordinary streets in the late 70s, after school, near crosswalks, outside little corner shops, while kids were still wearing their randoseru backpacks and parents were making dinner. People call her different things depending on who's telling it, but the name I first heard was Mika no Mask, the woman in the mask. Later, the name that stuck, the one everyone seems to know, is the slit-mouthed woman. And honestly, what makes her terrifying isn't what she does, it's what she asks. So, the version I was told begins in the summer of 1978, in a quieter town outside Nagoya. Not some remote village, just a place with schools, bus stops, alleys between houses, the kind of streets where kids walk home in noisy groups. One evening, a handful of elementary school kids claimed they saw a tall woman standing near a pedestrian bridge. She wore a pale coat even though it was humid, the kind of sticky heat that makes your shirt cling to your back. And on her face, this is the detail everyone repeats. She wore an unusually large mask. Not a normal little cloth one, not the kind you'd see on someone with a cold. This thing looked too big, too stiff, like it swallowed half her face. Back then, seeing a young woman in a mask wasn't normal. It drew attention immediately, so the kids stared. And that's when she stepped closer. They said she didn't move like a hurried adult. She moved gently, almost politely, like a teacher calling you over without wanting to scare you. Then she leaned down to their height and spoke in a soft voice, the way someone might speak to a child who's upset. "Watashi kirei? Am I pretty?" Now imagine being 8 years old and hearing a stranger ask you that. Your brain starts doing that quick math. Is this a trick? Is this a game? Is she lonely? Is she dangerous? Most kids in the stories said yes, because that's what you do when you're a kid and an adult asks you something strange. You try to answer correctly, and she would pause, like she was savoring it. Then, slowly, she would hook a finger under the edge of that oversized mask and pull it down. And underneath, there it was. A cut stretching from the corner of her mouth, torn wide toward her ear, like someone had tried to turn a smile into something permanent and wrong. The kids described it differently, but the shape was always the same. Too long, too deep, too deliberate. And then she'd ask again, "Kore demo, kirei? Even like this, am I still pretty?" That's the moment the legend becomes a trap, because no answer feels safe. If you say no, she gets angry. If you hesitate, she gets angry. If you scream, she gets angry. And if you say yes, well, some versions say she takes that as permission. The old neighborhood rumor, this part always sounds like adults trying to scare kids into behaving, was that she'd pull something sharp from her sleeve. Not always described as the same thing. Sometimes scissors, sometimes a craft knife, sometimes just something shiny. And then she would follow you, not running at first, not like a movie monster. People swear that's why the panic got so big. It wasn't just kids telling a spooky story. It was kids coming home pale and shaking and saying, "A woman stopped me and asked me if she was pretty." And suddenly parents didn't want their children walking alone. Some schools, this is one of my favorite details because it feels so real, started sending groups home together, like little escorted clusters. Teachers standing at the gates longer, neighborhood adults watching intersections. It turned into this community-wide vigilance, like everyone was waiting for her to show up again. And here's what's creepy. The descriptions stayed consistent. Usually with ghost stories, the details blur. One town says she's old, another says she's young. One says red dress, another says white. But with her, people kept saying the same thing. A young woman, 20s, maybe early 30s, long dark hair, a pale coat that didn't match the season, and that mask, always too big. Some people even said she was beautiful above the mask. Clear skin, elegant eyes, the kind of beauty that makes you understand why the question mattered to her. But then there's another detail that always made me uneasy because it's so specific. They said she smelled strongly of hair product, like cheap pomade. That old-fashioned, oily, sweet smell. And kids started passing around advice like it was playground survival wisdom. If you shout wax 3 times, she hates it. Or in another version, say camphor and she backs away. And then there was the candy trick. Someone decided, some kid, some older sibling, who knows, that if you offered her a sticky sugar candy, like those amber-colored ones from festivals, she would freeze for a moment, distracted, just long enough to slip away. Isn't that strange? A spirit with a sweet tooth, a monster who recoils from a specific scent. Those details make her feel less like a demon and more like a person with fixations, like the legend accidentally captured the habits of someone real. And that leads into the origin story, the one people repeat because it sounds the most grounded. They say she was obsessed with her face, not in a vain cartoon way, more like she believed beauty was her safety, her value, her identity. She saved money for a cosmetic procedure. This was the era when those surgeries felt new and risky and whispered about. And during the operation, something went wrong. In this version, the doctor had strong pomade in his hair. The smell filled the room. She inhaled sharply, maybe a sneeze, maybe panic. His hand jerked, and the scalpel slipped, cutting from the corner of her mouth upward, ruining the one thing she thought made her untouchable. The story says she snapped, that she attacked the doctor, that she fled, that she couldn't stand mirrors anymore, couldn't stand her own reflection, and couldn't stand the idea of anyone seeing her and deciding she wasn't worth looking at. So she started asking strangers the same question, again and again, like she was trying to patch something broken inside her with a stranger's answer. Am I pretty? And that, to me, is the real horror. Because beneath the gore and the chase and the playground rules, Her question feels painfully human. It isn't really about beauty. It's about validation. It's about fear. It's about the desperation to be seen as acceptable, even after something awful changes you. And what's unsettling is, people say she never really left. Even decades later, there are modern sightings. Different cities, different streets, but the same eerie notes. Someone else says they heard a muffled voice behind them at night. Gentle, almost shy. "Hey, am I pretty?" And when they turned, she wasn't close. She was farther back than she should have been, like she'd already drifted away, but was still watching. And after masks became normal in the world, the legend got worse in a new way. Because now she could blend in. People online started writing things like, "I saw someone at the station with a mask that was too big. Her hair moved even though there was no wind. She turned her head too slowly, like she was waiting for me to notice." And the creepiest modern twist is that she doesn't always chase anymore. Sometimes she just stands there. Sometimes she watches you walk away. Sometimes she smiles under the mask, like she already knows what you're thinking. Because the truth is, her question doesn't have a correct answer. Not really. If you say yes, you're lying. If you say no, you're cruel. If you hesitate, you're honest. And honesty is the thing that gets you punished. So when I think about her, I don't think about the slit mouth first. I think about walking alone at dusk, passing someone who looks normal, until you realize their mask is a little too large. And right as you convince yourself you're being ridiculous, you hear a soft voice behind you. "Watashi, kirei?" And you realize the fear isn't that she's a monster. It's that she's asking you to look at something you don't want to see, and respond like you mean it. You know how some stories don't really die? They just drift around the edges of places, like mist that won't lift. That's what this one feels like. It's one of those old coastal legends people swear they heard from a grandfather, or a neighbor's aunt, or someone who wouldn't lie about a thing like that. And whether it happened exactly as told or not, it still leaves a chill behind. So picture the western coast of Scotland, hard rock, wind that tastes like salt, and waves that never really rest. Not far from a jut of cliff the locals called Grey Cap Point, there was a sea cave that didn't behave like most places. At high tide, it vanished completely. No entrance, no hint it was even there. But when the water pulled back, the cave would open up like a dark mouth, and the air around it always seemed colder, like it was keeping a secret. The old tale says a family slipped into that cave sometime in the 1500s. People didn't know their real name, not at first. They eventually became known as the Kerr clan, or, in the way legends like to give you a nickname you can't shake, the Tide Cave Kin. At the center of it all was a man named Malcolm Sandy Kerr. The story paints him as someone who couldn't stand ordinary life, fields, chores, neighbors, rules. And he ran off with a woman named Moira Lorne, who had a reputation that followed her like a shadow. Folks whispered she could turn luck sour just by walking into a room. Maybe that was superstition. Maybe it was fear looking for a face. Either way, the two of them left their villages behind and headed for the coast, where the cave waited like it had been expecting them. Now, here's where the legend gets darker. Not in a flashy way, but in that slow, creeping way. Because the cave didn't just hide them, it separated them. Years passed, and the family grew. Children, then grandchildren, until the clan became a whole little world sealed off from everyone else. No trade, no friends, no help. Just the cave, the tide, and whatever they could take. And according to the tale, that taking is what turned them into something people still can't speak about plainly. Travelers started disappearing on the coastal roads. Single riders, small groups cutting through the night, merchants trying to shave a day off their journey. It wasn't every week. It wasn't always in the same spot. Just enough to make folks uneasy, then frightened, then convinced something was out there. You can imagine the rumors, right? People blamed bandits. Then they blamed each other. Some even swore the sea itself was swallowing men whole. But the legend says the Kerr clan only moved after sunset. They waited until the world went quiet, until lamps dimmed and roads emptied, and then they slipped out like they were part of the dark. The worst part, if you believe it, is how careful they were about staying hidden. For years, search parties came and went, finding nothing but wind and wet stone and their own growing dread. Then came the night everything cracked open. A couple was riding home after a long day at market. Nothing heroic, nothing dramatic, just two tired people wanting their own hearth and bed. The attack was sudden. The wife was pulled away in the chaos, and her husband, his name in the story changes depending on who tells it, but I heard it as Ewan, didn't run. He fought. Not like a legend, not like a ballad, like a terrified man who refuses to lose the person beside him. And maybe it was luck, or maybe it was noise, but help came. Other travelers, a few locals nearby. Enough people, enough shouting, enough blades in the lantern light that the attackers scattered back toward the cliffs. That's the moment the legend says the authorities finally stopped treating it like gossip. The search that followed wasn't a casual thing. It was the kind of hunt a kingdom launches when fear has spread too far to ignore. In one version of the story, the order came from King Alistair, and he sent soldiers with hounds trained to track a scent over rock and brine. They combed the coastline for days. And then the dogs led them to the place everyone had walked past 100 times without noticing, because the cave didn't look like anything at all unless the tide decided to show it to you. When they went in, the story says they found a life built out of hiding. Stolen goods, scraps of clothing, scattered belongings from people who had never come home. Enough proof to turn stomachs and silence a crowd. The Kerr clan was dragged out into the daylight like something that couldn't survive it, and the tale says their end was swift and merciless, less a trial, more a decision made in disgust and fear. And Sandy Kerr, the man who started it, supposedly left the world with a sentence that people still repeat when they want to make a fire crackle a little louder. You can't hang a shadow. Now listen, whether any of that happened exactly that way is still argued. Some say it was invented to paint the Scots as monsters during a time when politics loved a good horror story. Others say it's rooted in something real, something buried under retellings and exaggerations. But here's the thing. Even if it's myth, it's a myth that clings to that coastline. Because the cave is real. The tides are real. And people have always been frightened by places that can vanish and reappear, like the land itself is blinking. So when you're standing near the water on a gray evening, and you hear the waves pulling back, and you see a black opening appear in the rock where there wasn't one before, it's hard not to feel your imagination lean in and whisper, "What if?" You ever hear about a place so talked about that it starts to feel real, even if you can't prove it is? Okay, so there's this story people in Japan mention, like they're trying not to wake it up. Not on tourist maps, not in guidebooks, but somehow it's become one of those modern legends that refuses to fade. People call it Kuro Inu Village, and whether it ever existed the way the internet swears it did, that part's still fuzzy. But the stories? The stories are clear enough that most folks don't feel brave about testing them. What gets me is how it starts so normal. There's this mountain pass in Fukuoka, an ordinary-looking stretch of road, Tight curves, tall trees, that kind of quiet that feels peaceful at first. Locals call it Mizunoki Pass. If you drive it in the daytime, it's just forest, asphalt, guardrails. Nothing to point at and say, there, that's the scary part. But people who live nearby don't like talking about it. You ask for directions and they get polite in that way that means, please stop asking. And the ones who do answer don't say much, just little hints like, don't take that road at night. Or, if you go, don't go past the old marker. And then they'll change the subject so fast you feel silly for bringing it up. Travelers describe this weird shift, like the air thickens when you cross a certain bend, like you've stepped into the edge of someone else's private world. The kind of feeling where you turn the radio down without realizing you did it, because suddenly it seems too loud. But the real centerpiece of the legend isn't the road. It's a tunnel. An old, narrow tunnel tucked into the mountain. Locals call it Haguro Tunnel. It was built way back, early era construction, carved through rock like someone forced a passage through the mountain with stubborn hands in time. Years later, they built a newer tunnel nearby, wider, safer, brighter. So this one got abandoned. And normally, that would have been the end of it, right? Except abandoned places don't stay empty. Not when people get curious. It started pulling in the wrong kind of visitors. Late-night drivers, thrill seekers, kids daring each other to step inside with cheap flashlights and shaky laughter. And that's when the rumors really started. People said they heard talking in there. Not echoes, actual voices, like someone was just around the bend. Some said the temperature was wrong, warm in the dead of winter, icy in the middle of a humid summer night. Others swore they saw tiny lights flickering deeper inside, like someone was signaling or watching. And then, this part always turns the story heavier. There was an incident. Not some vague, a man disappeared thing. An actual case people still bring up in whispers. In the late 1980s, a young couple, let's call them Rina and Daichi, were found dead in a neglected building not far from the tunnel, badly burned. So badly that identifying them took time. It wasn't some neat horror movie scene either. It was messy and real and awful. The strangest detail people repeat is what investigators supposedly found around the site. Marks, symbols, scraped into dirt and ash. Not anything anyone could easily match to a gang sign or a local religious practice. Just wrong-looking scratches, like someone tried to write a language that didn't belong there. The case never got a clean ending. No satisfying answer, just a file that went cold. After that, the tunnel was sealed. Concrete blocks, barriers, the kind that says, "This is not for you." And you'd think that would calm things down, but it didn't. Because when someone seals a place like that, people don't think safety, they think cover-up. Something like a hidden village. And this is where the internet takes the wheel. In the early 2000s, an anonymous poster on a Japanese message board wrote this long, breathless account claiming they'd gone beyond the tunnel, past where the road is barely a road anymore, and found a village tucked deep in the mountains. They said there was a wooden sign at the entrance, old, weathered, like it had been there a long time. And it read something like, "Beyond this point, the law does not reach." No protection, no rules, no help if something goes wrong. That single detail, more than ghosts, more than curses, lit people up. Because it's not just scary, it's personal. It implies there's a place where nobody has to answer for what they do to you. The post spread, then more posts appeared. Some probably copycats, sure. Some may be people stacking lies on top of lies. But over time, the details started lining up in this eerie, consistent way. People who entered didn't come back. Phones lost signal the closer you got. There was supposedly an abandoned car, a pale sedan, half off the road, banged up, stained, like it had been dragged through something it couldn't survive. Someone claimed there was a lonely public phone near the sealed tunnel that rang at exactly 2:13 a.m. And if you picked it up, the voice on the other end didn't say, "Hello." It said your name. And the most unsettling part, the part that made the legend stick, was this. If you were chased out there, it wasn't by spirits. It was by the villagers. Living people, breathing, fast, angry. Because ghosts, people tell themselves, have rules, patterns, limits. But people? People don't need permission to be cruel. That idea, the danger is human, is what turned Kuroinu village into something people couldn't stop thinking about. Now here's the twist, and I swear it's almost too perfect. There actually was a real village connected to this whole area. Not the lawless nightmare from the posts, but a normal community with families and routines and ordinary problems. Let's call it Inunaki Valley Hamlet. And in the 1990s, when a dam project expanded, that village was relocated. The land was flooded to create a reservoir. Homes, roads, everything, gone underwater. The residents moved away, like people do when development decides your hodistions is in the way. So the place vanished, physically. And the timing was exactly what an urban legend needs. A sealed tunnel. A real village that disappeared. A horrible unsolved crime nearby. A viral internet story tying it together. And the mountains, those quiet, staring mountains, holding all of it like a closed fist. People started connecting dots that were never meant to touch. But that's what fear does. It builds bridges out of coincidence. Over the years, the legend evolved. It stopped being just a creepy place and became this symbol of isolation, secrecy, and what humans might become when they cut themselves off from everything else. Movies hinted at it. Horror games borrowed its bones. YouTubers went searching with shaky cameras and overconfident voices that got quieter the deeper they went. Some explorers claimed they found paths that didn't feel right, like the woods were guiding them in circles. And one of the strangest details, my favorite, even though it gives me chills, is what a few people said about the reservoir near the dam. They claimed that late at night, if you stand near the water and listen, you can hear something muffled coming up from below. Not voices, dogs, faint barking, like it's trapped under the surface. And the wild thing is, even after people debunk parts of it, after someone points out timelines don't perfectly match, after someone says, that sign was probably fake, the legend still doesn't die, because it's not really about one tunnel or one village. It's about a fear that's older than any forum post. The fear of stepping somewhere the rules stop applying. Not haunted by ghosts, but haunted by what people might do when they think nobody can stop them. And even now, if you ask locals around that area, a lot of them just shake their heads and tell you, real simple, don't go. They don't explain. They don't have to. Because sometimes, the scariest stories aren't the ones with perfect proof. They're the ones that stay half out of reach, stitched together from whispers, bad memories, coincidence, and silence, leaving your imagination to fill in the parts you wish you didn't see. Hey, so, if you ever find yourself driving through the soft, wet countryside down in Dumfries and Galloway, the kind where the hills look like they're holding their breath and the fog sits low like it belongs there, there's a stretch of road I'd honestly think twice about. They call it Kinmount Strait, part of the A75. It sounds harmless, doesn't it? Like any other strip of tarmac cutting through fields. But locals don't talk about it the way they talk about normal roads. They talk about it like it's watching, like it's got a memory. And maybe, just maybe, it doesn't always know what year it is. The A75 runs a long way, linking routes toward the border, and people have been traveling it for generations. But Kinmount Strait, that's where the stories cling. Drivers swear it isn't just a bit spooky. They swear it's like the air thins out there, like the line between here and somewhere else gets blurry. And the thing is, it's not just one or two stories. It's decades of them. Same kinds of sightings, same cold fear, same sudden silence after, when people try to explain what they saw and can't make the words sit right in their mouths. There's one story that always comes up when people start swapping tales. An old one, from the early 1960s. Two brothers, Callum and Ewan McBride, were driving home late one night. Nothing dramatic, just trying to get from one place to another. They'd been chatting, radio low, the usual. Damp road, mist rolling across the fields. Then, out of nowhere, something flicked across their headlights. A bird, like a hen or a small chicken, flapping right into their path. Callum slammed the brakes, braced for the thud. But there was no impact. No feathers. No shadow falling away into the verge. Just gone. Like it had never existed. They sat there a second, hearts going too fast, doing that thing you do when you're trying to laugh off something that scared you. Then they kept going, because what else do you do on an empty road at night? Only it didn't stop. Not long after, another animal appeared, this time a cat, pale as a smudge of fog, right at the edge of the beam. It stepped into the road and, it should have been solid. It should have moved like a real creature. But it didn't. It blinked out. Not ran off, just vanished. Like someone switched it off. Then a dog. Then something that looked like a goat, awkward and wrong in the way it moved. Each one showed itself for a heartbeat, long enough to make them gasp and grab the wheel tighter, then disappeared before they could reach it. Ewan kept saying, "Did you see that? Tell me you saw that." And Callum's hands were white on the steering wheel because, yeah, he saw it. Every bit of it. And then came the worst part. Ahead of them, in the mist, they saw the rear lights of a lorry. One of those boxy delivery trucks, the sort you'd expect to see hauling furniture or crates. Big illuminate, slow in the lane, perfectly real looking. Relief hit them weirdly. Like, thank God, something normal. They started to close the distance, and as they did, the truck simply wasn't there anymore. No turnoff, no engine sound fading, no brake lights. Just empty road where a whole vehicle had been a second before. That's the part that makes your stomach drop, isn't it? Because an animal could be your eyes playing tricks. Fog can do strange things. But a lorry? A whole truck doesn't just evaporate. They drove the rest of the way in silence. And then there's the procession. This one gives me chills every time I picture it. Drivers have described seeing people walking along Kinmount Strait in the dead hours, after midnight usually, figures moving through the mist like they've been doing it forever. Not one person, but a group. A line. They look tired, not modern. Clothes hanging loose, ragged around the edges, like they've traveled hard. And they don't talk. They don't look up. They just keep walking, step after step, as if they're following an invisible path only they can see. One haulage driver, I heard this from someone who swore they knew him, pulled over because he thought it might be stranded travelers. He saw them clearly at first, several figures, hunched, dragging bags that looked heavy, the sort of luggage you'd take if you were leaving somewhere for good. He got out, called out, tried to wave them down. They didn't react. They just walked on, straight through the fog, and dissolved into it, like mist swallowing mist. Some say they're the echoes of old travelers, traders, farmhands, maybe even people fleeing trouble. This part of Scotland has its share of harsh history, raiding, violence, sudden deaths on lonely stretches of land. It's not hard to imagine souls with unfinished journeys. And it's not just people. There are animals reported too, only not quite right. Shapes that resemble deer but move wrong. Things low to the ground that look like dogs until the headlights hit them and you realize the outline doesn't match anything you know. Always the same pattern. They appear. They hesitate like they're deciding something, and then gone. Then you get the individual apparitions, the ones that feel more personal, like you've stumbled into someone's private haunting. A woman in a pale dress is one that comes up again and again, walking along the edge of the road as if she's lost or waiting. Men in dark coats crossing without warning. A figure standing in the lane, forcing a driver to swerve, only for the road to be empty the moment they glance back. And there's one account that really unsettles people who hear it. An older man, dressed like he's out on an estate shoot, tweed, cap, that old-fashioned posture. A driver swore he saw him on the verge holding a rifle. As the car approached, the man lifted the gun, not waving it, not resting it, aiming it. The driver ducked instinctively, expecting something. And then, as the car passed the spot, the man vanished like smoke. No footsteps, no rustle in the grass, just absence. Now, there are explanations people offer, fair ones, honestly. Long drives at night, fatigue, the fog playing tricks with light and distance, the mind filling in shapes when it's under stress. And if that was all it was, you'd think the stories would be random, wouldn't you? But the strange part is how consistent they are. Different people, different decades, same stretch of road, same kinds of sights. Animals that blink away, vehicles that disappear, figures walking like they're halfway between worlds. And the land itself doesn't help, because Dumfries and Galloway has had darker chapters than most people realize. In the 1800s, there were grave robbers, men who stole bodies to sell to medical schools. People called them resurrection men, like the name could soften what they were doing. Some of the graveyards near the route were targeted, and folks still whisper that disturbing the dead leaves a stain on a place, like the ground remembers. And here's what I'll tell you. If you ever do drive it, and the mist is heavy, and the world feels muffled, don't speed. Don't push through like you're daring it. Just take it steady. Keep your eyes where they should be. And if something steps into your headlights, something that shouldn't be there, try not to panic. Because the scariest part isn't the moment you see it. It's the moment you realize you're not entirely sure it ever left. So, for most of my life, I laughed off ghost stories. I grew up in Chans, and yeah, of course I'd heard the classics. Someone sees a face in a mirror that isn't theirs, footsteps in an empty hallway, a figure at the end of a staircase that's gone when you blink. But I always figured there was some normal explanation. Being tired, being stressed, your brain filling in blanks when it's dark and quiet. I didn't really lose that belief because of some dramatic haunted house moment either. It started because of someone I met through work, this very ordinary man named Kenji. Mid-40s maybe, soft voice, neat hair with a bit of gray at the sides, thin metal glasses, the kind of person you'd pass in a hallway and forget 5 seconds later. One night after a company get-together, just one of those evenings where everyone drinks a little too much and the trains start feeling like they're swaying more than usual, Kenji sat beside me and told me something he'd never told anyone at the office. I remember his fingers trembling slightly around his cup. He said it began on a completely normal weeknight. He'd stayed late again, paperwork, emails, the usual, then left the building close to midnight. He rode the train home, got off at his station, and started walking through his neighborhood. Quiet streets, old houses, streetlights spaced out like they didn't really care if you could see. Halfway through his usual route, he felt it. You know that feeling, right? That pressure at the back of your neck, like your body notices someone before your eyes do. At first, he ignored it. In a city, someone walking behind you doesn't mean much. But the feeling didn't fade. It stayed, steady, calm, persistent. So he glanced over his shoulder, and there was a figure. Not close enough to see clearly, not far enough to dismiss, just standing in the darker stretch between two streetlights, like the shadows had decided to take a human shape. Kenji sped up a little. The figure matched him. He slowed down. The figure slowed too. He crossed to the other side of the street, trying to laugh at himself. And the figure crossed as well. He told himself, it's coincidence. Someone lives nearby. Someone is walking home too. But when he turned the next corner and looked back again, nothing. No person, no footsteps, no sound at all. He got home and couldn't relax. He stood by his apartment window for a long time, staring down at the street like he expected someone to look up and smile. He said he didn't sleep much that night, and the next night was worse. He changed his route home, took a different train, got off at a different station and walked longer just to convince himself it wouldn't happen. But at some point during the walk, always when the streets got quieter, always when there was a gap between lights, he felt it again. That same prickling awareness. Sometimes he caught the shape as a silhouette. Sometimes it wasn't even a shape, just a patch of darkness that seemed too dark. But it always held the same distance behind him, never rushing closer, never falling back, just there. After a week, he looked different at work. His eyes were sunken. His shoulders stayed tense like he was bracing for someone to tap him. He started turning his head a little too quickly whenever someone spoke behind him. He just smiled and said he was tired. Then one night, this is the part he told me in a voice so low I had to lean in, he decided he couldn't keep living like that. He stopped in the middle of the street. Just stopped. Heart pounding, palms cold, and he turned around and stared straight into the darkness behind him. This time, it didn't vanish. His eyes adjusted, and the figure became a person. A woman. She was wearing a white kimono, old-fashioned, formal-looking, like something from another era. Her hair was long and black and hanging forward, hiding most of her face. But what he could see wasn't scary in a monster way. It was worse than that. It looked like pain had settled into her expression and stayed there for years. She didn't move. She didn't breathe, at least not in a way he could see. She just watched him. Kenji said he tried to scream and couldn't, like his throat locked up and refused. And then, just like that, she was gone. He stumbled home, shaking, and that's when he remembered something he'd almost forgotten. A few months earlier, he'd gone back to his hometown for a short visit. Nothing special, just seeing family, walking around familiar places. One afternoon, he wandered out of boredom and ended up near an old, abandoned shrine on the edge of town. Overgrown weeds, rotting wood, a stillness that felt heavy in the air. He remembered feeling watched there too, but he'd brushed it off. Inside, among dust and broken offerings, he found a small wooden box. Simple, light, carved with faded flowers. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't even try to make it sound noble. He took it. Just took it. He told himself it was a souvenir, something strange and old to put on a shelf and forget about. But now, sitting alone in his apartment, staring at that box, he felt something click into place. Like he'd connected a thread he hadn't realized was wrapped around him. After that, the nights became unbearable. The woman appeared more often, clearer, sometimes closer than before. He tried everything you can imagine, sleeping with lights on, keeping the TV running, calling a friend and staying on the phone while he walked home. Nothing helped. Finally, he did what a lot of people would do. He ran. He quit his job, packed up his life, moved to a small town far away, someplace quieter, someplace he hoped wouldn't have room for whatever was following him. For a few nights, it worked. He slept, he ate, he could breathe again. And then one evening, walking down a street he didn't even know well yet, he felt it. That same pressure, that same certainty. And there she was, standing beneath a flickering streetlight, as if she'd been waiting patiently for him to stop pretending he could escape. That was when he knew he wasn't dealing with a random haunting. He was dealing with something attached. Kenji eventually returned to his hometown and asked around until he found an elderly priest, someone who still knew the stories of that abandoned shrine. The priest listened quietly, didn't laugh, didn't look surprised, just nodded slowly, like he'd heard the shape of this before. Then he asked one question. "Did you take something?" Kenji showed him the box, and when word finally came that he wasn't returning, she couldn't accept it. She ended her life there, at the shrine. The priest said some places, some objects, when enough emotion sinks into them, become anchors. Not cursed in the movie sense, just heavy, tethered. And when you take the anchor, the spirit clings to what it knows. Not always out of anger, sometimes out of loneliness. So they went back together, Kenji, the priest, and the box. The shrine was even more broken than Kenji remembered. Wind pushing through weeds, wood creaking like it was exhaling. The priest lit incense and began a ritual. Quiet words, steady hands. The air filled with that sharp, clean smell that always makes you think of temples and old prayers. Kenji placed the box back where he'd found it. And he said, right then, he felt something lift from his chest, like he'd been holding his breath for months without realizing it. In the corner of his eye, he saw her one last time, but softer now, less twisted, like the pain had loosened its grip. And he thought he heard a whisper. Not loud, not threatening, just a small voice, almost grateful. "Arigato." Thank you. When Kenji finished telling me, he didn't look like someone trying to scare me. He looked sad, quiet, human. "I don't think she wanted to hurt me," he said. "I think she just didn't want to be left alone. And I'll be honest, I think about that sometimes when I'm walking home late, especially when the street gets quiet, especially when there's a long stretch between streetlights. When I get that feeling, like someone is behind me, I keep walking, and I don't turn around." Okay, so this all started in my dorm. My dorm building is ancient, like the kind of place with heavy doors, creaky floors, and that old stone smell that never really goes away. People say it's been there for well over a century, and honestly, it feels like it. My room is actually pretty big for a dorm. When you walk in, there's this little front area by the door, like a mini entryway space, with a table pushed against the wall. One night I was standing there talking with my boyfriend, his name's Eli, and then I turned back to the table to keep organizing some stuff. And that's when I felt it. I felt this pressure, like something pressed against my backside, not like a tap, more like someone leaning in, the way Eli does sometimes when he's trying to be playful and affectionate. It was so familiar that I didn't even question it at first. I remember thinking, "Oh my God, Eli, not right now." And I actually smiled a little because I thought he was right behind me. But then I turned around. And he wasn't behind me. He was across the room, by my bed, like fully across the room, looking at me with this confused expression, because I'd clearly reacted to something he didn't do. And we both just kind of froze for a second. We laughed it off, because what else do you do? I told myself maybe it was my clothes shifting, or I bumped the table, or my brain just filled in something that wasn't there. But then the next day, things got worse. Eli and I got into an argument. Nothing dramatic, just emotions, stress, college stuff piling up. He left my room to cool off and went to this stairwell a little ways down the hall. He sat there on the steps by himself for a while, just sad and quiet. Later he told me that while he was sitting there, he heard footsteps coming toward him. Not rushing, just normal steps, like someone walking up to check on him. He said he felt this presence before he even saw anything, like the air got heavier. Then he looked up and saw a shadow on the wall, one that looked like my shape, like it was me standing nearby. And then he felt something touch his back, like a hand, gentle, almost comforting. He said it felt exactly like me, like I'd come to sit with him and put my hand there the way I do when he's upset. And he was waiting for it, waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to finally come find him. But when he turned around, there was nothing, no one, no shadow, just empty stairs. He said he got this horrible cold feeling and stood up fast, like his body knew before his mind did that something wasn't right. He went outside afterward to this little patio area behind the building, and while he was standing there trying to breathe and calm down, he saw something moving in the trees. Not like a squirrel or a cat, something big. And it wasn't just swaying with the wind. It was like the branches were being shaken violently, like something was pushing through them. And the weirdest part is, it wasn't even that windy, just a light breeze. After that, things didn't stay in the dorm. That's what scares me the most. Eli doesn't even live with me. He lives at his own place off campus, and after those first 2 days, the stuff started happening to him there. One night, he was taking a shower super late, like everyone else in the house was asleep. He told me the bathroom key had been missing for a while at that point, which mattered because the lock had basically been useless. But while he was in the shower, he saw the bathroom lock turning, just slightly, like someone was testing it, twisting it back and forth, like something scurried past. Not a full animal shape, more like a quick, low shadow movement, like it didn't want to be seen. And then the next day, his uncle, who lives there too, said something similar happened to him. Different timing, same bathroom, same weird feeling. And then, just this past week, I was at Eli's house and it was super late, like 3:30 in the morning late. We were both up, just messing around in the kitchen, making a fruit bowl because we couldn't sleep. I stepped away to go to the bathroom and he stayed in the kitchen washing fruit. A minute or two later, he knocked on the bathroom door and he goes, "Can I come in?" I was like, why? And he opened the door anyway, looking genuinely worried, and he asked me if I needed him, because he swore he heard me calling out to him. Loudly, but I hadn't said a word. He told me it wasn't random either. He said it sounded exactly like my voice, specifically this one tone I use when I'm trying to get his attention fast. And it used his nickname, the nickname that literally only I call him. I remember my skin going cold when he said that, because he wasn't joking. He wasn't trying to mess with me. His face looked, honestly, kind of haunted. He asked me to try to recreate it, like to call for him the way he heard it, so he could compare. And I tried. I really did. I said it a few times, changing the tone, trying to match what he described, but he kept shaking his head and going, "No, that's not it." And he said, "It was you, but it wasn't you." Since then, it's been almost daily. He says he feels a presence a lot, especially when he's sad, like something is closer when he's vulnerable. One time he told me it felt like something tried to comfort him again, the same way as on the stairs, like it wanted him to believe it was me. He also keeps feeling like something is in certain rooms. Like he'll walk into his bedroom or the kitchen or the bathroom and immediately feel like he's not alone. Not in a paranoid way, more like that instinctive thing, like your body reacts before your brain catches up. And there's one more detail that makes my stomach turn. His room has this smell now that we cannot explain. It's only in his bedroom, nowhere else in the house. And it's not like sweaty laundry or old food, it's wrong. Like something rotting, like something left too long somewhere you can't find. We've checked vents, closets, under the bed, everything. It comes and goes, but when it's there, it's strong. So yeah, that's the main stuff. And I know how this sounds. I know how it sounds. But it's happening, and it's messing with us, especially him. And the part that keeps circling in my head is that whatever this is, it's not just random noises or old house stuff. It's imitating me, and I don't understand why. So if anyone actually knows about this kind of thing, like genuinely, what could this be? And why does it seem attached to him now? What do you even do when something is copying your voice and trying to act like you? You know how every place has its stories? Things folks swear up and down are true, even if they can't prove a lick of it. Well, where my dad's people come from, tucked back in the deep hollers and long stretches of woods, there's no shortage of ghost talk. Lights in the trees, shapes on the ridgelines, sounds that don't belong to any animal you've ever heard. But there's one story, one, that stayed with me more than all the rest. I first stumbled onto it on this old local sightings website, one of those early 2000s pages where people would type up their experiences like they were confessing something. There were tons of legends on there, sure, but this one report felt different. Simple, specific, and the kind of creepy that sinks its hooks in you. It basically said, anytime you're walking a rural road out here, you'll hear footsteps in the woods across from you, like something is pacing you from just beyond the tree line. If you stop, it stops. If you keep walking, it keeps walking. Same rhythm, same speed. And sometimes it'll mimic the way you step, like it's learning you. The first time I read that, I got that cold little prickle behind my ears, like my body knew the punchline before my brain did. And growing up, I couldn't let it go. I'd bring it up at cookouts, on porches, in the kitchen while somebody was shucking beans. Just casually, like, hey, have you ever heard about the footsteps on Old Mill Road? And every single time, people would get this look. Not the, oh, that's spooky look. The, don't say that too loud look. Most of them called it the devil, or something dark. Or they'd use that hush-hush kind of language, like naming it might invite it closer. My great-uncle, everyone called him Ray, had his own story, and he wasn't the type to spin yarns for attention. Ray was a coon hunter, the kind that went out late, no fuss, no fear. He had a handful of dogs that'd follow him anywhere, loyal to the bone. But one night, he told us, those dogs wouldn't go another step. It was way past midnight. The moon was thin, barely enough light to make the trees look like they had faces. The dogs had been running a trail, excited and noisy like usual, and then, like a switch flipped, they froze. Not just hesitated, froze, hackles up, ears pinned. That low, miserable whine dogs make when they want to disappear. Ray tried calling them forward, whistling, snapping his fingers, even stepping past them to lead the way. Nothing. They just stood there, trembling, staring into this black wall of woods like they were looking at something that Ray couldn't see. And then he heard it. Brush cracking, fast. Not a deer crashing off. This sounded deliberate, like it was moving around him, circling, closing the distance without ever stepping into the moonlight. He said his stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. Ray lifted his rifle and tried to listen for breathing, for a snort, for any sign it was an animal. But the woods went wrong quiet, like everything living had decided to hold its breath. Then that movement came again, closer, on his right, then behind him, then left, like it was testing him. And Ray, old as he was, alone out there, decided he wasn't going to be proud about it. He started backing out. The dogs followed tight behind him, so close they bumped his legs. And whatever it was, followed too, staying inside the trees, matching him. When he walked faster, it did too. When he broke into a jog, it picked up right with him. Ray said he finally got scared enough that his pride snapped clean in half. He ran. It didn't stop chasing until he hit the open clearing of his property, where the woods finally pulled back and the moon had room to spill across the ground. Right at that edge, like there was a line it wouldn't cross, it stopped. Ray tore into the house, slammed the door, locked everything he could lock, and didn't step back outside until daylight. And the next morning, when he told the family, his voice was still shaking. My great-aunt Mabel, his sister, used to say you could see it in his eyes, like something had looked back at him out there and left a mark. And then there was another story people would bring up when I asked around, this one from my mom, about a family friend named Clint who used to live alone in an old house swallowed by the woods. It sounded peaceful on paper, you know? Quiet, no neighbors, just birds, wind, and trees. But my mom remembered him coming by my grandma's place early in the mornings, sitting down with a cup of coffee like a man who'd been awake for a week. Gray around the eyes, hands jittery. That hollow, scraped-out look people get when sleep won't come no matter how badly they beg for it. Finally, my grandma asked him what was wrong, and he didn't laugh or dodge it. He told her straight. Something was in that house with him. He said late at night the windows would rattle like fists were pounding the glass. The whole place would shake, pictures tipping on the walls, boards creaking under invisible weight. Plates and silverware would fling off the shelves like somebody had grabbed them and hurled them. And the front door, this is the part that always makes my skin crawl, would slam open and closed over and over, like the house couldn't decide whether to spit him out or swallow him whole. And it wasn't once. It wasn't a single bad night. He said it happened again and again, always late, like the thing waited until the world was asleep so it could have him all to itself. And he told my grandma, in this small, tired voice, that it wouldn't let him sleep. Months went by like that, until one night it got worse, violent, personal. Clint said he heard glass shatter in the kitchen, and then a plate came sailing through the room, close enough to his head that he felt the air move. Then another, like it was trying to take him out. And out there, deep in those woods, there wasn't anywhere to run. No neighbor's porch light, no car passing by. Just trees and dark and the feeling that you're very, very alone. But Clint was a man of faith, and whatever you believe, you can hear it in the way people talk when they're clinging to the last thing they trust. He dropped to his knees right there in the middle of the chaos and started praying, out loud, denouncing it, telling it to leave, calling on Jesus by name. He said the moment he did, the house erupted like he'd kicked a hornet's nest. More crashing, more slamming, like the thing was furious he dared to fight back. And that's when Clint broke. He bolted out the door and ran into the woods, not toward anything, just away. He ran for what felt like hours, branches tearing at him, feet slipping in the leaves, lungs burning, trying to find a road, any road, like pavement itself might be protection. And the whole time, he said, he could hear it behind him. Not a voice, nothing so clear, just movement, snapping twigs, keeping pace in the dark, like it was playing the same game as that old story online. When he finally found the road and hit it, he didn't stop. He walked it through the night until morning, until he reached my grandma's place with his clothes dirty, his face cut up, and his eyes wide like he'd seen something no one should ever have to see. And even then, standing there in daylight, telling her what happened, he said the worst part wasn't the house. Deep in the woods. Same pace, same patience, like it knew exactly where he was. And I'll tell you this, every time I think about that story, I catch myself listening a little harder when I'm walking near a tree line. Not because I want to hear footsteps, because somewhere deep down, I'm not totally sure I won't.